We are live. Yay. Oh my gosh. I'm already so excited. I think, bless you. I think the consensus between we three hosts is that regardless of thoughts, this is going to be a very fun conversation tonight.
Yes.
And as people trickle in, I will just say that we are talking about Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Ooh, yeah, I want to see everyone's editions.
Nice.
Whoa, the drama.
Yeah.
I love when we all have different ones. It's like equally as exciting as when we all have a matching copy, I think.
Yeah, it'll also be interesting because we have different translations, probably.
Yes, I was thinking about that. It'll be super interesting for the quotes part, especially.
Yeah, because
I read along with the audiobook, and it took me like an embarrassingly long time to realize that the translations aren't going to be the same. So I was like, what's happening?
This is hard to follow along.
Well, when I looked at my copy to see like who the translator of my edition was, it doesn't have one. It actually it just says
you.
Yeah, it's wild. It just says I can't find the page now. Oh, here we go. La Fantôme de l'Opéra was first published in 1910. The present translation of the Phantom of the Opera first appeared in 1911 and remains anonymous. Wild.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever come across that. So.
Imagine taking, I don't even know how long it takes to, read one work and translate it sentence by sentence into another language and then be like, don't give me any credit. I just did it for funsies. Like,
right?
It's probably a Phantom of the Opera fan girl. Like the first one.
Yeah. The first.
Yes. Truly. Taylor, does yours have a translator?
So the audiobook that I listened to, which was a Penguin Classics audiobook, the translation was by, and I did take 2 years of French, and my pronunciation is really bad, but Muriel Ribier. See, I butchered that, but
okay.
I don't know who did my print copy, though.
Maybe you also have the mystery translator.
Yeah, I could.
Oh, okay. Alexander Teixeira de Matos.
Oh, okay. That's mine too.
Oh,
copy. So
cool.
But you didn't really read much of that one, so we probably will have to.
I just brought it here so I could hold it up.
This is your prop book.
Yeah. She's like, look, I read it. Not this, but this,
This is my emotional support copy.
Yes.
Yes.
And Margaret's here, as promised. My friend. Oh, that was an intense siren.
Excited siren voice.
I have the window open because it's so hot in here.
Fair.
And I live across the street from a hospital and next door to a police station. So I apologize in advance.
Well, if you have an emergency, you're set. But
yeah. But in the meantime, we get to make just so many jokes like, oh, that's them coming to arrest the Phantom. Here they go.
I was just thinking of that. Oh, they're about to arrest every man in this book.
Now I have
to take them away, boys.
Would you rather be stuck in the woods with a bear or the Phantom? That's not an actual question.
That would be
of course.
I mean, they're so equal in many ways. It's hard to say. Okay, but I am so. We'll do introductions in a second, but I just want to preface all this by saying we're going to be a little different tonight, and we're going to work backwards towards characters, which I think we've maybe done like once or twice ever before, but it just feels like we're going to have so much to say about these characters that's going to be like the meat of things. So after we do our little intro and beginning stuff, I have a few discussion points and then some that directly tie into characters. So we'll come around to them. But before we get started with all that, let's do our little round of introductions. The old who are you? Where can we find you on the internet? And then if you would like to throw in, let's hold off on Phantom, but my question of the month will be, if you could have a musical created for any of our Past It Classics books, which one would it be?
Ooh, okay, I gotta pull up our list while we.
Yeah,
I know.
pull up the list too. The minute you said that, I forgot every single thing we've ever read.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
I
kind of glanced at the list, and to my knowledge, the majority of them don't have any sort of musical adaptation.
Right.
I think there is one for Jane Eyre, but I'm not familiar with it.
There is, yeah.
All right, I think I've got my answer ready.
Okay, then do your introduction while Taylor ponders.
So, hello everybody. My name is Cara. My channel is Wilde Book Garden, which is the primary place you can find me. I read a lot of all kinds of things. I feel like I say some variation of that all the time because that truly is one of the defining features of my like reading diet, is like all over the place. And I currently run a book club that specifically reads and discusses middle grade and young adult books. So I read across age ranges as well. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else. And my answer to Julia's very excellent question is North and South. Because, like, that would be, like, the relationship drama. There would be some amazing, like, duets or, like, ballads. There could be a couple of, like, really intense, like, theme songs about, like, you know, the issues that the book deals with. As far as I know, there isn't, like, a musical version. But if it was, like, done well, it would be fantastic. What is Bento's answer?
I think he agreed. That's why
I can't read. So I'm Taylor from PageScreenTaylor. Once upon a time, I posted videos, but then something about the pandemic and da-da-da-da-da. So now my channel is basically Past It Classics shows that I host. So I like to read classics. Romance is a big one. Women's lit, sci-fi and fantasy. Basically, I don't really discriminate with genres, but I do tend to gravitate more towards romance, women's lit, and sci-fi and fantasy. And for me, I'm so grateful you chose North and South, Cara, because that was one of the three that I had narrowed down. So I'm going to cheat and say two. Rebecca, I think, would make a great, like, gothic musical, sort of like Phantom of the Opera. Mm-hmm. And then for a fun musical, A Midsummer Night's Dream, I think, would make a really
that
fun.
Was what I thought would be super
so
fun. Yeah, I think Rebecca, there is like a German musical or like operetta or something, because I periodically will like read about it hoping that somebody's gonna translate it, and like they haven't so far, but like that would be, like, I agree, Taylor, that would be a really fantastic musical, and as you said, very similar to Phantom vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
good answers. You guys never disappoint, honestly. And then, yes, I'm Julia. You're here on my channel. So I just realized it says my channel twice on my thing, as if that's not redundant. Sorry, can't think and talk about something else at the same time. Okay. My brain doesn't work like that. And yeah, mainly you can find me on my Instagram, which is the same name, Shakespeare and Such. But sometimes I'm here too. Sometimes. And then, well, as Cara hinted at, you know, you might get some other bookish discussions about some classic middle grade books that I'm very fond of soon. So wink, wink. Okay. Is that everything? Oh, my answer for the musical question. Space Case. Okay. I think I would like a musical adaptation of The Blue Castle. I think it would be very sweet. I think it'd be like really beautiful staging with all the nature stuff. I have a vision of it. I'm thinking like very small cast. Yes. And I love small cast musical. So
yes, Sissy would get her own song that would make me sob through the whole thing.
It would be a great ballad as she's dying, and everyone would be sobbing. Yeah.
That's such a good answer.
Everything that you both said, though, were also ones that I was like, ooh, maybe that one. So strong agree. Okay, beautiful. Let's go around now and talk a little bit about Phantom. So your familiarity, have you read it before? If you want to touch on the musical, that seems natural as well. Or if you have read any other Gaston Leroux, I would be shocked if you had, but perhaps you have. So do tell.
So for me, this is my first time reading the book in its entirety. A couple years ago, I want to say about 10 years ago, I was reading this book and I got to maybe chapter 3 and then I got my wisdom teeth taken out and I was like, I can't deal with this. I'm an invalid for the rest of like this week. I can't do it. And I never went back to it. Other than that, I guess I was mostly familiar with the musical, which is my favorite musical ever. So yeah, I mean, most of my familiarity comes from the musical, but I am very happy I finally read the book.
Oh, and if you want to share your rating now, you can.
Oh, sure. I'm going to be giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I had so much fun. Is it the greatest book I've ever read? No. Is it completely like well done? No. But for sheer enjoyability, it gets a 4-star from me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm trying to organize my thoughts because I sort of have a lot of parts to my answer.
Okay.
So this is at least my third time reading the book.
Wow.
Because I remember, like, because I also am a big fan of Phantom, and so at one point I was like, I should read the original novel, and like I knew they'd be different, but I was just curious, and I was like, I probably would at least find it interesting since I know I already really love the musical and the story. And so I read it from my library, and I really, really liked it. And then later on, I bought a copy of it, and I was dismayed to find that some of my favorite quotes were not in that, which is one of the first times that I remember thinking about translation in like a serious way, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like an interesting, like, I guess, milestone in my reading life. So like then later, I was at a bookstore with a friend and there was like a used copy of Phantom that was different from my edition. And I picked it up and I flipped through to see if it had the quotes that I wanted. And it did. So I bought it. And it's this one. Yeah. So, as I said, I've read it several times and I've always thought of like the Phantom story as one that like I enjoy in all the versions I've seen for different reasons. Like I enjoy the novel, I enjoy the movie, I enjoy the musical. And it's kind of interesting because this time around, I still liked it, but the frustrating parts were like more frustrating than I remembered. So I gave it a 3.5 stars, and before I had given it a 4. So I still like it, but I don't know. I don't know if it was something about me like misremembering some of my feelings from the book, because like there's some characters that I'm like, wow, I am even more pissed off with you than I remembered being. So sorry, that was like such a rambly answer to the question.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Like you live, you learn, right? Your opinions about certain things change. And then like, as you revisit something, you're like, wait a second, this part maybe should have raised some flags that it didn't previously. So yeah, that makes sense. I have never read The Phantom of the Opera until now, but I also really love the musical. Big fan. I don't even know what I want to say. I just love Phantom of the Opera. It's such a fun show.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, and I, like Cara, also gave it 3.4 because I have my stupid scale, but 3.5 stars essentially. I did really enjoy reading it, but my problem was that I liked the first half of the book a lot more than the second half.
Yeah.
I think there was like some pacing and some like point of view changes that didn't serve the story as well. Whereas I think the first half I would have given like 4 stars, maybe 4.5.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I'm getting a little bored. Sorry. Yeah. But it's fun. Okay. Before we dive into actual discussion points, please see my face. Sorry, I'm trying to unlock my phone. Content warning things. I'm like, look at me. Not all of these will necessarily come up in conversation, but they are present in the book. Probably most of them, 2/3 will come up in conversation. But some things that are within the Phantom of the Opera, just for your awareness, there is some Orientalism and some xenophobic language, also including us Romani people. There go the cops again. They're like, go get them, make them stop. There is murder, suicide, abuse to varying degrees, ableism, and also grief. So if those are a concern, feel free to click away. We'd love to see you next month. Who knows what that book's going to have? I have no idea. Anyways. I mean, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do kind of want to save some character stuff for later. It's okay, obviously, if you share, like, I really like this character, or like, a salient, appropriate, like, moments or scenes to bring up with them as we talk about these things. But first, I want to talk more about, like, the craft of the novel, because obviously, like, it's so gothic. It's almost like comically, like, obscenely gothic, and I really love that about it.
Yeah.
So it's a famous, Julia question without a question mark at the end, but like, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about like the genre and the elements that are reflected in here. And I also, one of the things that I really liked about the beginning is that it almost felt like it was even more leaning in like a horror sense, because we weren't seeing the Phantom at all. And it was very much this like foreboding. It was like the characters who are like, no, you have to believe me, this guy is real, and everyone's like, you're crazy, and they're like, he's real. And it was like spooky. I liked it.
Yeah.
So the floor is open.
No, so that it's a good question. Yeah, I think you said it really well, Julia, that like it is so gothic. Like you can tell that like Gaston Leroux is like having fun with it. Like it's like he basically like invents a few gothic tropes that weren't there before. And it's just like I mean, one thing you gotta say for him is like he goes all the way. Like he's like nothing is half-assed with him. And something else that I think is super interesting about like the storytelling, and this isn't so much genre, I guess, but like the structure, I don't know, like this feels like it could have been one of the first books that was sort of like found footage almost. Like it's like, I don't know, like you said, Julia, like kind of like a horror movie. That's sort of how it feels for a lot of it. Like he's talking about like finding primary sources and like interviewing people, and like that was really cool. And I had forgotten that was as big a part of the book as it was. So I think that was like really interesting, and also kind of feels a little gothic, because it's like that whole like you get to a place and you don't really know what's going on, and so you have to sort of figure it out because nobody's telling you anything. Yeah, so that's like a really general answer to your question.
Yes.
So
I'm too much of a lady to say it out loud.
But you're so correct. I agree with you, Cara. Yes.
Yeah, I agree too. That's honestly one of the things I really enjoyed about this book, because I do love Gothic novels and Gothic literature, and this just sort of filled that little like, or I guess scratch that little itch or whatever. I mean, one of my favorite things, and once again, I don't want to compare everything to the stage musical, but seeing as that was my first introduction to the story, you see the Phantom pretty early on, I would say maybe late for the titular character of your musical in terms of like musical themes, but in this one he barely makes an appearance until maybe like the second half. And I think that's such a wonderful decision, because it sort of maintains this air of like, is Christine really seeing this phantom? Why are people dropping dead in this opera house? And so by the time you see the phantom, you have all of these things that he's done, you know, in your mind. He killed Bouquet. He is terrorizing the managers of the theater. He's
which I feel bad, but I'm like, that's kind of hilarious. So, like they're so stupid that it's like hard to feel bad for them, which I know is like a really mean thing to say, but anyway, I'm sorry, Taylor.
You're not wrong though. And I, like you mentioned, Cara, the sort of compiling of different accounts, for the most part keeps the book from getting too dull, because you have all of these different perspectives that have their own sort of take on the ghost, and you know how they view the situation. Is it a ghost? Is it a man? Is it a prank? Is it not? I will say some accounts are much more interesting than others, because while I love this book, it does sort of slog like near the end.
Right, like, which is funny because that's like the part where all the action is happening, but I'm like, oh my god, just get out of the torture room already.
Why do you have a whole jungle underneath the opera house? I don't understand.
I will say that does bring about some of my favorite phantom moments, like when Christine is screaming because her fiance and the Persian are in the torture room, and Eric's like, no, you can love me, Christine. See, I can do card tricks. And I was like, Eric, stop, that's so funny. He's like, I can do ventriloquy, look.
She's like, could we maybe get them out? And he's like, pay attention to me.
Pick a card, Christine.
A menace.
What, Taylor? What'd you say? Sorry, Taylor, what did you say at the end?
Oh, I was like, everything, like, people are dying, and he's like, pick a card, and he card Christine, as he's like, sobbing.
Oh my gosh.
Eric moments, but it is, I think it's too long, personally. Like the torture chamber and them sort of going through his weird, like, maze of horrors.
Yeah. It was, it's funny that this has like gone this way too, because even after we talked about like genre, I wanted to talk about more of like the pacing and the structure of the novel. And so I'm glad it kind of came up naturally. Because I would agree, Cara, you described it as like a found footage like horror movie, because that is the vibe of like, this guy's real, let me prove it to you, this person saw this and this person wrote this. And so like that's kind of a cool way to build your story, and it does lean really into like the classic like Gothic structure of like, let me tell you a tale of what happened here with these people, like, you know. It's very Wuthering Heights, it's very all of them. But yeah, there's just something about like when he chose to implement those elements that I think were more successful than others. Like I loved like when it was just like an interjection, like he'd throw in a footnote and be like, oh, this person is the one who told me this, and later they also said this, versus like 4 to 5 chapters at the end of like the long arduous slog through basically the opera sewer, right? And like I don't know, it was just I almost could sense it was coming to this when it was literally like the halfway point of the book, and it was like the all I ask of you scene, and I was like, feels like we don't have a lot of story left. Why do we have so much book and not a lot of story? And I was concerned, and I guess I had every right to be.
Yeah, and some of the things too, they're like, I didn't actually mind having some chapters from the Persian, like as I thought he was like one of the more interesting characters, although he also, I'm like, how do you accidentally crawl into a torture room? Like, he's like, I know this place like the back of my hand, and then they're like, oops, like how did that happen? I just have questions. But for the most part, I feel like up until that point, he was one of the more like interesting and like competent characters for me. And I especially the like vibe of like him dragging little baby Raoul by like his leash or something. Actually, at one point, one of my favorite moments, because I think most of my favorite moments are when people are mean to Raoul.
Oh no.
But like one of the things that I found so funny is like, I think Raoul says something like, "We're gonna fight him and we're gonna fight," and he's like, "Okay, baby." Like,
Yeah, he did.
The Persian
at least in
shows
my
up and we're a bunch of,
translation,
like-
No, I think mine had something really similar. Yeah.
yeah. The Persian shows up and it's just a bunch of like terrified white people running around in chaos. And he's like, yes, we better help them out.
I gotta find it. It was so good. Also, okay, tell me if your translations were the same, but why it like sucks that we don't have a character name to call him, because I hate having to call him the Persian every time.
I know.
But why?
It's a microaggression every time we have to talk. Sorry.
He's constantly referring to Eric as a trapdoor lover, which is the funniest phrase to me.
Yeah.
What do you mean, trapdoor lover?
Yeah. There are some lines in here that are so beautiful and so like emotive, and like I love them. Like the fact that I specifically remembered quotes from the translation that I first read, you know, like that says a lot about the writing. But then there are some things where it's like, I don't know if I need to blame like Gaston Leroux or the translator, but like I feel like somebody should be blamed. Like there's one part where like they describe, I think it's the part where Christine unmasks Eric when he first like captures her, maybe the second time, I don't know, she's kidnapped multiple times. And she like unmasks him and he's like really, really upset and like, you know, screaming and crying and like threatening her and everything, and it describes him like crawling away like a snake. And I'm like,
what?
Like, what? Like, it makes me think of like do you remember in like the Grinch Stole Christmas cartoon when the Grinch is like up the Christmas tree? I'm like, this is so silly. Like, why are you giving?
No.
I'm like, why are you giving me this image? Like, this is supposed to be like a really serious. It's supposed to be a serious moment, and that description is unserious. Like,
there are a lot of unserious like moments in this book, like the rat catcher sent me, and like the fact that I think it's the Persian at this point, not the narrator, but he keeps referring to him as like a freak. They're like this out of control freak. Freak. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just like me for real, because I call people freaks.
I recently was talking about how much I love calling people freak, because it's like, it's a word that like in all, like when all is said and done, it's not like that mean of a word, but you can use it in ways that are just like so funny. Because I'll be like, oh, these people are slowing down the traffic because they want to walk outside in the beautiful weather. Those freaks. Like, why would they want to do that?
Yeah.
It's such a versatile word.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, like I don't want to get too much into character stuff, Julia, but like also the part how the Persian would be talking about any of like Eric's backstory or anything that was happening, and he would just like stop his narration so many times to be like, he was a hideous monster, so he was wrong. And I'm like, it's like, I mean, he's awful, but it very much had the vibe of like, he's ugly and therefore he's awful. Like when Eric is like, oh no, I'm loved for myself, and the Persian like turns to the audience, he wasn't.
He sure was wrong.
So mean. Yeah.
I love this idea that the Phantom like isn't even that hideous. He's just an average looking guy, but he's so dramatic.
Yeah.
Or
it's like everybody at the opera is just like unnaturally beautiful, and Eric has like acne or something, and they're like, oh my God, he's a rotting corpse. Push him into the sewer. Like,
Well, he is described as having no nose, like straight up no nose. So there's something going on. I don't know.
He's having like a fake nose with like a fake mustache underneath. I'm imagining one of those jokey like things with like the glasses. And he's like, "Is this what you want, Christine?"
Yeah. It's like, this could be me, your husband. Oh my God. It's absurd. It's absurd in the best and worst ways, honestly. Do we want to discuss a little bit just comparing it to the musical? Because since we're all like big fans of the musical, I feel like there are probably some things for you where you're like, oh my God, they said the thing. And then there's other things where you're like, that's quite different. And so I just found that an intriguing route, if you had any that stood out for you. Because at first, one, for example, for me was the whole, what was the horse's name? Cesar, the horse. And then she's like riding the horse underground. And I was like, oh, they didn't want to put a horse on stage. So they did the boat. And then there's a boat anyways. And I was like, what? Oh my God, he's got everything.
Yeah.
I thought that was a rewrite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which at least with the boat, like, it makes sense for having to get across the lake. But again, the horse, purely for drama. He's like, I'm going to lead you on a white horse to my little lair. Like, my Mojo Dojo Casa house.
And for extra drama, I'm going to steal that horse first, even though I have so much money because I'm blackmailing everyone. But I'm going to steal the horse.
Yeah. See, I was like reading about him and I'm like, honestly, in Boston, he might be kind of a catch. He's got his own place. He's bringing in an income. He's got a car and a boat. I'm like, okay. His own spacious sewer.
His own spacious sewer. I know. I did keep thinking, I was like, he and Victor Hugo would have gotten along so well. They would have loved talking about all this underground nonsense.
New authorship just dropped.
Taylor, were you going to answer the question before?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the big thing for me was sort of the pacing. Like I said earlier, you know, in a musical, it would just be so weird if Eric didn't show up until like late Act 1 or Act 2. Mm-hmm. So obviously he has to show up earlier because the musical's named after him and people aren't patient enough to wait, and that includes me. But I do love that it takes a while to get to him and there's this whole mystery to unfold. I do like that they cut a large amount of the characters from the story in the musical or like combined other ones, like Raul is both Raul and the Persian combined. Now, it would have been nice to have a person of color in the musical, but I'm also like, no person of color would be dealing with all this. I would have moved. Like, not to victim blame Christine, but I would have moved a long time ago. But, you know, she's not black, so.
She has a different sense of judgment, you know? She's just a little white girl.
Who's blonde? That threw me. It was like, no, she's not. No, that's Meg. Meg is the blonde one.
Psych. Meg's not blonde. Yeah. She has black hair.
Meg's barely in it.
Yeah. Yeah, Meg is barely in it.
I think it's interesting too. Yes. And I think it's interesting too that like some of the characters they keep, but they just give them an entirely different like vibe. Almost like Madame Giry is like very just like this very like respectable like older woman. She's very like no nonsense, very elegant, and like in the book it's like, and then this like street urchin clown just with like shows up with her 3 teeth and her hideous bonnet. Like, what a doofus. Like, it's wild.
Also, it was wild to me that she like is serving the Phantom because the Phantom was like, your daughter's gonna be an empress someday, and she's like, really?
Yeah, that was like such a specific.
To be fair to Madame Giry, he has proved that like he follows through on these things. But yeah, that was funny. And answer your question, Julia.
Well, we did finish the book, and Meg was not an empress by the end of the book, so.
Well, no, that's because Eric was dead. Like, I
That's
don't
Meg's
think that
fault.
was his fault. Okay, I think your contracts are not legally binding after your death. Like,
That's why you get everything in writing.
True. Yeah, it probably was
Yeah.
just a verbal contract.
I don't know if this was
There you
like
go.
a translation issue for my edition, but wasn't that Madame Giry's, like the feathers on her bonnet moved with her emotion? Like at one point they're like in the shape of question marks, and then I think she gets fired and they stand straight up. And I was like, are
Yeah.
they
It's
angelic?
horrifying.
I
think it was supposed to be like comedic. Yeah, I think it was supposed to be like comedic, like, yeah, that she was like shaking her head in agitation, and so like it would be funny if they did. But yeah, that was kind of like, it was funny, but it was like a weird like personification thing. As far as like comparing it to the musical, I find it really interesting that there are characters that I like more in one version, which before rereading it this time, I remembered that I liked book Raoul a lot more than like musical Raoul.
As you told
I don't
me,
think that's true
you
anymore.
liar.
I know. I don't think it's true anymore. And also in the musical, obviously they cut out a lot of the unnecessary backstory, which was a good move. And they also cut out a lot of things to make Eric more sympathetic and to make it more of like an actual love triangle, which part of it also is that like when you have people interacting on stage, you're going to have that like bonus of like chemistry that you don't have in the book because it's not the same medium. But yeah, it's interesting how they sort of like simplified some of the characters in a way. But also, I like Christine better in the book because in the musical, it can kind of feel. You what?
I like Book Christine a lot too.
Sorry, what did you say? Oh yeah, yeah, and it's like I feel like in the novel, it's like she's kind of one of the only people who's like making good decisions. Like, I mean, she does have this sort of like classic, like gothic damsel in distress thing where like, you know, half the time she passes out when there's danger, but when she's conscious, she is actually like using her head, and the other characters are not. So I found Christine more likable in the book for sure. So
yeah.
I
think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Julia.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like the musical also tends to focus more on like inner beauty or like how superficial it is to judge someone based off of their looks. Not that the Phantom isn't a monster in that one, but by sort of cutting down on his crimes and associating him being ugly with like his evil deeds, as opposed to sort of him kind of using it as an excuse in the musical, which I feel like he does. It puts more emphasis on like the whole beauty is only skin deep, whereas this one, like a lot of older books, sort of conflate ugliness with like a sort of moral depravity.
Right.
And I think that has to do with like the timing. In the 80s when the musical came out, I don't think people would really and even today, people wouldn't really go for something like, if you're ugly, then you're evil. So I thought that was a pretty good adaptation when adapting it for a modern audience.
Yes. Yeah. Because you said that, I'm going to take the two things that I wanted to say and flip it.
Okay.
I agree. Actually, one of the things that I really love in the musical that I was hoping was going to like be more derived from the book, but I didn't get the sense that there was like a line that it was exactly borrowed from, is that part at the end of the musical when Christine sings to Eric and she's like, it's in your soul that the true distortion lies. That line is so good. And there wasn't really an equivalent to that in the book. And I was like, oh, I wanted you to say that so bad.
Yeah. Buddy, it's not the lack of a nose, it's the lack of common sense.
Truly. It's a lack of conscience.
Yeah. it's also interesting because in the novel, like, there are, I feel like, a few moments that it sort of, it's like almost critiquing the like beauty equals goodness thing, because we're told a few different times that, like, because Eric has been treated as like subhuman his whole life, he sort of took that to mean like, okay, so I don't have to follow any of the like morals of the human race, which obviously, like, he's not justified in doing that. But I think it's very interesting that, like, even in the novel there are like a few little references. I mean, like, one of the things that I think does keep me coming back to this story, and like, even though the novel has a lot of flaws, there are things that just get me every time. And like, something I think is very impressive is that it makes Eric absolutely reprehensible, but there are moments where my heart breaks for him. And one of those is when we hear about how his mother never let him hug her, and she would like throw his mask at him, like literally could not even look at his face. And that's one of, like, I mean, they're still finding in like studies that it's like kids need physical contact. Like, it's not just like a, oh, it's good for them if they have it. It's like a literal need. Like, people need affection. And so I think it's interesting that like the story of the novel does sort of allude to that. Like, there's even a line that I think I probably marked that's like, basically, if he had been an ordinary looking man, he would have been like one of the best, you know, people in the human race, because he had all this talent and everything, which again is not to excuse, like, he's still responsible for his decisions, but I just thought that was really interesting. Like, the book definitely doesn't go as far with it as, like you were saying, Taylor and Julia, like the musical does. And I think like stories today tend to be a lot more critical of that idea than the book is, but I do like that we still see it in flashes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's almost, it's hard for me to reconcile in a way, because on the one hand, as someone who enjoys that theme and like likes reading the whole like complex, I don't even want to say anti-hero, but like morally gray character of, you know, like he's doing all of these awful things, but this is what his life has been. So like trying to understand that. I hated how it kind of all seemed to come right at the end of the book. Like that scene that you were talking about where they talk about his mother not like ever letting him kiss her. Literally, it was in like the last 5 chapters, I swear. Like it was so late coming.
Yeah.
And then in the epilogue, they're like, by the way, this is his whole life story. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you're too late for this. Like, I don't, that should have come a lot sooner, or at least in bits and pieces. It didn't have to all be one story.
Yeah.
But then if I had gotten my way with that, I recognized that it would have undercut some of that like gothic dramatic tension of like, what is he a man? Is he a monster? Is he an angel? What's his deal? You know? So like, I guess I can't really have my cake and eat it too, but I will complain either way. So
I do think that also comes later in the musical too, where he mentions like, my face which earned a mother's fear and loathing, a mask my first unfeeling scrap of clothing, which I love every time. It does come pretty late into the narrative, but I think the benefit of having, you know, a more visual medium is that you can see a lot of the interactions around them, and I think it's easier to get the point across through things like looks and touches, as opposed to in the book where it's like, I get, you know, he had a bad childhood, so.
Yeah. And like you.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Cara.
Sorry, I feel like I keep cutting you off, Taylor.
No, it's fine.
Something that you guys also made me think of when we're talking about like getting some of that backstory so late. It's like even the stuff that, because the Persian is the one who knows basically everything about like his background, and so because his chapters are all at the end, it's sort of like trying to catch us up on like all of the sort of circumstances for the Phantom. And one thing that is interesting, it's just like a throwaway line, and again, this is one of those things where I'm like, a translation could really affect this, but there's that one line where he's describing probably when he tried to go into the lake and he almost drowned, and then Eric was like, oh, I didn't recognize you. And the Persian says, I don't think he understands right and wrong. And it's just like one little sentence in the middle of everything else. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Like, is that true? Like, do we think that's true? Because that's one of those things where, you know, like the insanity defense in court, for example. I know that's not exactly the same thing, but that's something where you are like literally deemed like you are incapable of understanding what you have done being wrong. You know, I don't know. So it's really interesting that we get all of these like possibly extenuating circumstances right at the very end. It's like one thing that I like about musical is that even though they sort of soften the Phantom's character a lot, I like that he's at least more morally gray throughout the story so that you can be more on board with like him and Christine having those interactions.
I'm not. I loved actually that the book, there was like zero romanticization of the Phantom at all in the book, and I was here for it. I was like, yeah, this man sucks. I don't like him. Sorry.
I was actually going to bring that up where in the musical, it does seem like Christine is like a little horny for the Phantom, especially in Music of the Night, which is, and also the end of the Phantom of the Opera song.
You know what though?
Yes.
There are multiple times in the book where they describe her listening to him singing, being in ecstasy. And I thought that was like a little bit like suggestive. I was like, in ecstasy, you say? Yeah. Wow, strong language.
Yeah.
Well, and Julia, like you said, I like that it doesn't over romanticize him in the book. And something that's like interesting about that is that I feel like the romantic part of his character or of his relationship with Christine, it's all through his voice. Like the way that they describe his voice and like her reaction to the singing. And it's like, if we've, you know, like being people who enjoy musicals and music in general, it's like there are those pieces of music that give you like an emotional, like spiritual reaction almost. And so it's really interesting that is sort of the only way that Eric is like portrayed romantically, but it doesn't matter because he's so hideous that nothing would fix it. Yeah. Also, though, how can you like Raoul though, Julia? Because even though he's not as like obviously bad as the Phantom, this man is like, he is trash. He's just trash in a like more normal way.
I will take normal trash over the flaming dumpster fire. What are you talking about? A bag of trash in my kitchen is not worse than a whole landfill. I hate to break it to you.
I'm not saying worse. I'm saying like also terrible. Like the number of times that he like flips his shit and starts calling Christine a slut.
It's in like, the questions. Wait,
so funny though. It's like
any liar. It's in the plan.
I'm so excited to talk about Raoul. Actually, everyone in this story, because everyone has one brain cell except for the Phantom, who has two because he can build traps.
And write
operas.
And Raoul never gets a turn. Raoul never gets a turn with the brain cell.
Raoul is just like clinging to Christine's brain cell, and he's along for the ride. Okay.
Yeah, the dumbest bitch. Like,
so, here's what I want to say, character-wise. Let's start with Christine, I suppose. She's not the titular character, but I would argue she is the central character because I think if she was not in this story, the Phantom story would be different entirely, right? You feel me? So I think Christine's very interesting. She, within the plot, does lack a lot of agency, but I don't think that says anything about her strength of character. I think the book actually showed her to be an incredibly, I'm not going to say incredibly smart, but a shrewd and incredibly strong character. Both not only in terms of choices, but also physically. There are times when she's like dragging Raoul, and I was like, okay, Christine. Wow. Oh, Cara, are you frozen? I thought you were just listening to me very intently. But
I was like, Cara's very disapproving of your take, Julia.
I was like, I thought you liked Christine. No, Cara.
Cara, oh no.
No. I'm pausing my thoughts until we get this settled. No. I need her to hear it.
I just can't get over how I thought that Cara was just very disapproving of your take.
I know. I was like, oh no. Oh, okay, wait. Huh?
Sorry.
Hi!
My computer was like, that's enough from you. Like, I'm back.
Yeah, we both thought you were just entirely in disagreement with my take, and I was like, no, you like Christine, you told me so. Why are you staring at me like that?
That would be no, that would be so rude. Oh my god.
You're like,
I'm sorry, everyone.
And like for a long time, I was like, Cara really doesn't like this take.
I'm so sorry. Just assume that I'm frozen if that happens. Anyway,
well, unless I'm talking about Raul, and then you might mean it. We'll see.
I might make that face, yeah.
I don't know how much you heard of that, Cara.
I think it cut me out as soon as you were like asking the question about Christine.
Okay, great. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit because I think you'll agree with me. So I think that while in the book, Christine does lack some agency, she actually shows herself to be a very strong character in the book, not only in terms of like her like planning and like thinking things through, but also like physically strong. Like there are times when she's dragging Raul around, which I think is amazing. She's like, no, you won't open this door. And she will like barricade, which is hilarious. But also, I think we need to discuss Christine within the whole like Madonna whore dichotomy of womanhood, because I would argue that both the Phantom and Raul, I guess I can call him Eric and Raul view her in this way at different times in the story, and it is at some points deeply upsetting to me too, don't get me wrong. So yes, thoughts on Christine, and specifically if you want to talk about her perception by the male characters also.
Yeah. I do agree with what you were saying. Like, she is kind of constrained by the like society of the time. Oh no, is my computer gonna freeze again?
Oh no.
No.
It's good so far.
Yeah.
You can tell when it's going to freeze. Cara. You're scaring me. Oh my, you predict that? Cara!
Oh no.
How does she know? How does she know? And why did she make the same exact
I was going to say.
every time her computer freezes? She's so judgmental. Cara, come back to us. Oh my god, that's so funny. And she was the one talking, so now we're just left in a lurch.
Oh,
Bento, any thoughts on Christine?
intermission from Bento.
Oh, hi, baby.
We can
Oh,
do a little dance to entertain people.
Dancy boy.
Everyone do the Bento.
Do the bento. Do the bento. It's not as cute when I do it.
I think it's very cute.
Well, Taylor, how do you feel about Christine?
So, I do think she's one of the less interesting characters of the book, and part of that is just, you know me, I live for the drama. I live for the guys in this book because all of them, with the exception of the Persian, are dumb. I love dumb men. But one, I will say she is more interesting in the book than she is in the stage play because, Cara, go ahead.
Continue your thoughts for us. We were just trying to fill the space. Can you hear us? Okay.
Okay. Did you want to pick it up,
I
Cara?
can. It's not showing me video though. I'm afraid it's gonna kick me off again. This is so
Dang it.
frustrating. I'm
We
sorry,
can see
everybody.
you for now. Oh no! Dang it!
You spoke too soon, Julia.
No!
Maybe it's the Phantom.
Oh my god. He's here. The Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom of the live show.
But who is he stalking?
Whoa. Valid question.
I can keep going about Christine then.
Keep going, girl.
I do feel like in the stage production, Christine is only as good as her actress. If that makes sense. Like there are some actresses that put a lot of personality into the role. Like Sierra Bodges is one of my favorites.
Yes.
But if you have like a meh actor playing Christine, you're going to get a very uninterested and uninspired character. Whereas if it's an actress who knows like what she's doing or where she wants to take the character, then she tends to be more interesting. Whereas in the book, this is your only adaptation. Cara, did you want to go?
I'm so sorry. If it
No,
happens
it's
again, I'm
fine.
going to restart my computer and see if that works. So I agree with what you were saying about Christine Julia, that even though she is sort of pinned in by like the societal expectations, in terms of her decision making, she actually is one of the most active and effective characters in the book. And especially with like the big decisions at the end, like she saves everybody's life.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's her choices that makes Eric actually let her go. Like she is the one who gets the happy ending for everybody. I mean everyone except Eric, but like that's pretty impressive. Yeah. That's pretty impressive, especially for a Gothic story and a classic of this period. I mean, she's certainly a lot more active and effective than Raoul, who just kind of like walks around. He's like, I'll fight him. And it's like, babe, like you have, I think I said on Goodreads that like he has the emotional resilience of a 4-year-old child. And like the idea that he could duel somebody, wild.
It was so endearing to me when he was like, but if I hold the pistol with my other hand, I can't shoot it. And the person's like, that's not why you're holding it. Don't worry about shooting anyone.
I'm so happy he
also, okay, that's another thing.
Alive. Sorry, Cara, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's like a little thing about like the musical versus book. I do appreciate that in the novel they actually explain the hand at the level of your eyes thing, because in the musical they really don't give you any context for it. Like somebody calls it the Punjab lasso at one point, but nobody says like, oh, you have to keep your hand up so that, because he's really good at strangling people. Yeah. So if he tries to, you can pull it off real quick. Like there's actually a reason for it.
I used to think it was because
and then
he
the
was
other
like,
part of
so ugly you had to like cover your eyes. And it wasn't until like
honestly, I'm kind of surprised. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that wasn't the reason in the book, because everybody makes like such a point of, and I know that's an important part of the story, is like how hideous and monster like he is, but it's like anytime anybody is talking about anything, they have to remind you like, oh, he's literally unlovable. Like he's so ugly. I don't think you understand how ugly this man is. Ugly. He looks like a rotting corpse. Okay, let's keep going. Like, yeah. And then the other part of your question, Julia, which I really like that you asked that, because it is really interesting. The whole Madonna whore complex. I feel like Eric tends to view her as the Madonna. And it's also interesting that even at the end, when he's talking about like, we can be happy, you'll be my wife, and I'll take you for walks in the garden and blah, blah, blah. It's not really romantic. Like, it's not a romantic or sexual thing with him, which is interesting. It's just, like, affection.
Can I interject?
And I feel like with Raoul...
Can I interject just to say, thank God it's more affectionate than romantic?
Yeah.
Because he genuinely, like, did we all catch this? He's old. He's old enough to be her father.
I think he's old. In his 50s.
Yeah, that was like a weird thing they like throw in one time. Yeah.
He's like, I've been working on this opera for 20 years. And I was like, wee woo. Get him out of here.
Yeah. And I think with Raoul, it seems much more like he goes back and forth very quickly, like in the same conversation. And that's one of the things that I find it really, really hard to like Raoul as a romantic option. Like I ship Christine with like her music career, honestly. Like, I'm really upset that that no matter who she chooses or what she does, it's like she doesn't get to sing anymore. Because, chorus girls are sluts and everybody knows that. So like I think that with Raoul, it's much more like he seems really unstable to me, honestly. Like the quickness where he goes from like being so happy and being like, I totally trust you, Christine. I believe you. I understand. And then like all of a sudden he's like, you are a slut. Get away from me. You are a monster. I hate you. And he's like screaming and crying like a little kid. It's disturbing to me. And again, I'm not saying it's more disturbing than what Eric does, but I personally, like Raoul, he creeps me out because he is so much more like regular. Like there's a lot of red flags for me of like an abusive partner. Like it makes me think a lot of Hero and Claudio in Much Ado About Nothing, where it's like he is so quick to believe that Christine is like sleeping around or like seeing somebody else, and that's the only thing that matters, is that he can believe that she's pure. Also the number of times that both of them think of how childlike she is, very icky. It's really weird.
Very weird.
So Raoul is also basically a child. Yes. And it's said so in the book where they're like, and they played to be engaged like children, and I was like, there we have it.
And they're at least better matched in that regard, but like his behavior I really don't like. And I don't like also that he and his older brother, they're like, well, obviously we can't actually marry a chorus girl. Like that would never happen. And it's like by the end, Raoul does change his mind, because I guess he realizes that he cares about her even more than he thought, because he like sees her in danger or whatever. But it's just like, I don't know. It's hard to overlook that wasn't how he felt initially for me.
Yeah.
So that was a really
go ahead.
Answer to your question, Julia.
Yeah. Thanks.
No, I was just apologizing for how like
when I asked about Christine.
I just like to.
They are connected.
I know. I'm teasing you. Go ahead.
With Christine, I keep going back to the musical because that is like the biggest touch point. Mm-hmm. But something that I prefer that they did for Christine in the musical over the book is her decision she makes at the end, where it's, do I marry Eric and save everyone, or I don't marry him and everyone in the opera house blows up and Raoul and the Persian die? Whereas in the play, it's one person, it's Raoul who's going to die. And honestly, I find the musical version a little bit more meaningful personally, because that decision with everyone in the opera house dies or I marry him, it's more of a no-brainer. You're saving a lot of lives versus there's something I always found very beautiful about the Phantom of the Opera story is loving someone so much that you're basically giving your life away. Not, physically, but like metaphorically, you're marrying someone who is reprehensible, not for his face, but because he's very old and
he's reprehensible because he's a murderer.
But that was something that I think sort of fleshes out her character for me more in the play. But like I said, and you might not have heard this, Cara, but I do feel like in the musical at least, Christine is only as good as her actress, which is a flaw in the writing of her character. And I do think that in this book she has more of a character. I don't know. I don't really find her that compelling, but that's because I love drama and the drama surrounds her, but she doesn't really take part. So
She's just within the drama.
Maybe if she were a little more messy.
Yeah. I feel like I had so many things that I wanted to respond to from both of you that I forgot all of them collectively. I do, again, I stand by, I like book Christine. It's very interesting to me that initially when we see her and she's being so hot and cold, it is not too long before we realize that's literally her being like, hey, Raul, shut up, you idiot. He's going to kill you if he knows I love you. So I'm acting like I don't love you. Like, hello.
The number of times that she straight up tells him, like, Raul, we can't let him know that we're together. And he's like, it's me, Raul. Like,
we're engaged. I love her.
He's so dumb. He is so dumb. Like, I just can't, like, not in an endearing way for me. Like, he's just, how has natural selection not come for his ass? Like, I don't understand.
When you said earlier, Cara, that Raul, like, flips out every once in a while when he starts to believe, Christine might be a hussy or whatever. One of the weirdest parts in the book for me was when Raul, like, approached her guardian and he was like, listen, is Christine a virgin? And I'm like, this is so weird. Raul, you're so weird.
And I love that she was so quick to be like, oh, honey, she can't even get married. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That was a bizarre scene. Very much a fever dream. Yeah, I do
really was like so invested. Sorry.
Sorry. No, back to the Christine of it all. I think it's very interesting that both Eric and Raul are so quick to turn on her anytime it's when they think she's like pulling the wool over their eyes, right? Like anytime they think they've been tricked, that's when they get so angry. Yeah. That's like very fragile masculinity if I've ever seen it. Because that's literally the only time either of them get pissed off. They're like, oh, she's been lying to me. Oh, she's trying to fool me right now. Whore. Actually a whore. Don't love her anymore. So that is very telling. And by the way, I am going to be the clown who has some defense for Raul, but I do not forgive all his actions. I do think he had some scenes that made me so mad, especially the early ones where he's like, oh, she's lying to me. I don't love her anymore. But then there were like a couple beautiful lines and he was like, I'll die 100 times for you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, sorry. I'm just a dum-dum and you're just a fictional character, so we're going to go with it. Yeah. Oh, it's starting to rain. Okay, any other thoughts on Christine? And then I think I was going to go to Eric, but let's go to Raul since we've already spoken about him so much.
I will just say that I wish Christine had female friends. Like in the musical, she at least has Meg.
Oh my God, right?
Maybe that's why Andrew Lloyd Webber did that. He was like, we need a girl.
Yeah.
Well, like she needs a couple girlfriends.
She needs a gal pal.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna do a girls' night out. You're going to meet men that are not Raul or the Phantom because your ex is
like she'd be telling like her girlfriends about. It's also interesting that she doesn't have her mom around because that would also suggest maybe that's part of the reason these things happen. But it's like, yeah, she needs some girlfriends to be like, babe, like he's lying to you. Like he's trying to sing you into the opera house, into the cellar of the opera. Sweetie, no. Like,
what about just a nice stage hand? What about someone around the opera?
Yeah,
who's normal.
Yeah. Honey, he killed a man and lives in the sewers. Sorry,
like, you can't fix them, sweetie. Like either of them, you cannot fix them. One of the things also that like I like that the musical does is like I really enjoy that they make Carlotta more of like a character. Like Carlotta is such a dramatic bitch, and I love her. I freaking love her. Like she is an icon. I love that like people are literally getting murdered, and she's like, "Well, that little bitch isn't gonna take my solo." Like that's.
No, when Carlotta gets her friends to like go to her performance so that they can like suss out the Christine supporters. And like her friends are there and they're like, huh, it seems like everyone loves Carlotta. Maybe she's being a little bit dramatic.
I had started a Carlotta tab.
I think Cara froze again.
No, I thought she was just judging again. No, Cara. No, I genuinely had started a Carlotta tab, and then it quickly petered off because I was like, oh, you're not in this book anymore? Okay.
I know. I was hoping she would be in the book more because I also love her in the musical. And I love the function she plays as this other, like, antagonist who sort of serves as, like, the managers. One of the reasons the managers want to disobey the Phantom and appease Carlotta is to keep her there because she brings in the money.
Yeah. One of my notes on Carlotta where I wrote, she's just like me for real, was when Carlotta heard of the astounding reception bestowed upon her understudy, she was at once cured of an incipient attack of bronchitis and a bad fit of sulking against the management and lost the slightest inclination to shirk her duties. Like, she's like, oh, someone's going to outshine me. I'm okay. I'm fine. Here I come. And I love when they were like, are you still going to sing tonight even though you were threatened? She was like, I could be literally dying and I will be singing up there. Make no mistake. Like, she's fantastic.
We love a girl boss.
Cara, welcome back. Hope it lasts. Okay. Do we want to move into Raoul? Yes. Do we dare unpack this?
There has been a scene that I have been wanting to talk about because it's so goofy.
Take it away.
Basically,
I don't have Cara anyway, so
it's the scene where, like, so at one point Raoul was listening in on Christine through the door, and later on he like mentioned some sort of conversation she had with the Phantom, and she was like, "Were you listening at the door?" And he was like, "No, that was the first time. The second time I was in your closet." I'm like, Christine, are you not going to question this?
Raoul.
I was like, what am I, a weirdo? No, I was in your closet, girl.
Please. Yeah, okay. Raoul is a clown.
Yes.
It is clown behavior, but oh, thank you. Wait.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, but here's the thing with Raoul, and I don't want to get into it before Cara's here because I need her to hear me out. I don't think she'll change her mind. I just want her to hear me. I do need to be perceived.
I'm so, like Carlotta, you need to be perceived. I'm like so excited to hear your rationale behind being a Raoul stan.
Because here's the thing. I have a literary and actual thesis on it.
Wait,
like,
really?
Oh yeah. Like something in the craft of the novel that I want to bring up. But I'm waiting for Cara because it's important that everyone hears me.
I will say the Raoul in the book is a lot more fun than the Raoul in the stage play. The Raoul in the stage play is like too competent. He thinks too much about what Christine wants. He wants to help her for unselfish reasons.
Boring.
Like, please. Men don't stay in your closet and listen in on your conversations with other men like they used to.
Not like the good old days, huh? But also, yes. Hi, Nana. So glad you're here. What a delight. We're talking about Phantom of the Opera. Here, while we're waiting for Cara to reappear, I'll share a fun anecdote, which is the one and only time that I've seen Phantom of the Opera like live in person was on Broadway in 2014 when Norm Lewis took over the role as the first Black Phantom on Broadway. Very exciting. And my friend and I, who went to go see it, stayed afterwards because we like wanted to get autographs and stage door and everything. And of course he's got like all the makeup, so he takes forever to get out of the theater. And his assistant came out and was so nice and was like, he'll be coming, he just needs a little more time. Like he like was so kind. And then Norm Lewis was like the sweetest famous person, not that I've met an abundance of famous people, but he's the sweetest famous person that I've ever met. He was like so friendly. We tried to take pictures. When the first one didn't turn out, we took another better picture. Like it was so nice.
I love that.
I
love Norm Lewis. I'm so jealous you got to see him. And also the idea of a Black Phantom terrorizing the opera, that's civil rights. That's what MLK would have wanted.
Cara, welcome back.
Hi. I'm happy you got to come back to that sentence, Cara.
I love the Norm Lewis as well. So
I mean, it's the best time to come back.
Yeah. Sorry again for my computer. I feel like it's like my laptop being haunted by like Carlotta or something. Like, what's going on?
There's like a Phantom of the live show.
Yeah. Next time I ask you a question, Cara's just gonna croak like a frog.
Yeah. The way they spelled it was really funny in my version too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, not to be too dramatic, but I did wait to talk about Raoul because I was telling Taylor I have like legit literary analysis as to why I think his character was written the way it is. And I think it's very interesting. And I don't think it's going to change your mind, but I do think you're going to go, a compelling thought. So, so here we go. Even though Christine is the classic Gotham, Gothic, like damsel in distress and like our heroine, so to speak. Cara, are you frozen again? I swear to God. Okay, I'm sitting down. I was scared. Raoul, I think, was very intentionally and purposefully, those two words mean the same thing, but I'm saying both for emphasis, written as stereotypically feminine from the first moment we meet him through the end of the book. Because our very first introduction to Raoul talks about his mother and his sisters and how it seems like he just came off their apron strings. And there's so much that is feminine about him, actually. What do they say? Oh no, not his mother, his aunt. As a matter of fact, padded as he was by his two sisters and his aunt, he had retained from this purely feminine education manners that were almost candid and stamped with a charm that nothing had been able to sully. They even describe his complexion as like a girl's. He's very spoiled. And then as we go on, he's got love at first sight. He's incredibly emotional and quick to go from joyous to crying to angry to happy again to please forgive me. And not that I'm saying these are positive attributes to, stereotypically associate with women, but I do think that was very intentionally done. And I just think it's interesting that Christine in their relationship is the one who's dragging him about and telling him what to do. And Raoul is like this dramatic, emotional love interest.
That's really interesting. So like, why do you think Gaston Leroux would like sort of write Raoul that way? Like to be sort of like, I guess, the inverse of your stereotypical Gothic hero?
I don't know. Maybe he was just in a subversive mood. That's as far as my thesis goes, Taylor. But I do think it was done purposefully.
Interesting.
I don't have a reason why, other than perhaps to just give some sort of interest and something different to the story. And again, this is not to say that those are positive female stereotypes,
Mhm.
nor does it excuse Raul's actions, because there were scenes when I was so angry with him and I was like, that's not my boy. I don't claim you in this scene. But I just thought it was very interesting to me.
That is interesting, and I was thinking too with a lot of his like crying when I read the book. I'm like, you don't see a lot of male heroes crying as much as he does.
He cries
But
a
I
lot.
was like, well, Raul's also young and just, I don't know. He is a crier, and I would say maybe that's like to contrast him with the Phantom, to sort of portray these more effeminate qualities as positive. But the Phantom isn't particularly like masculine, like
Right.
masculine as well. You know, he also cries a lot. You know, he's quick to anger, quick to be sad, quick to self-pity. He's apparently a genius. So like I am curious like what Gaston was trying to say there.
Yeah. Has anyone read
I
Lord of
love,
the
I
Rings?
love my boy Frodo.
I feel like
Frodo is what Raoul could have been.
Aw.
fan of the opera, but Frodo.
Which is very funny because in my shorthand, I write it as PTO, POTO, like Poto is Phantom of the Opera. So I'm like, Frodo, Poto.
I do
Frodo
like
back.
I do like that he calls himself like POTO or POT or like the opera ghost, but because in the musical sometimes I refer to him as
OG.
OG.
Yeah. My copy's constantly calling him OG, and I'm like, hell yeah, he's the OG.
OG. Yeah.
So funny.
I know. I do think, Julia, as you said, I do think that thesis about like Raoul's femininity is very interesting. I don't know that it changes how I feel about him. But I'd have to think about that more to think of like how that might change the way his character like comes off to me. But
in the words
yeah,
of Raoul,
since we're
that's
talking
all I
about...
ask of you is just to hear me out on that.
I'd also like to say that like on top of being a clown, Raoul is just incredibly like selfish in a way that just really grinds my gears. Like everything is about.
I slightly beg to differ. Cara's frozen again. But carry on with your thought, and then I'll add on.
It was just more like everything he does seems to be not just with the mind of like saving Christine, but so he can be with Christine. And that could just be my I don't even dislike him. I just find him very silly. But I guess my general distaste for him, I think that sort of fueled it. But like I said, I could be wrong. I could be biased.
I disagree.
Yeah,
in
like
that... Go ahead, Cara.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, kind of going along with what Taylor said, it's like both of them do this for sure, Raoul and Eric. But I think because Raoul is portrayed as the romantic lead, it bothers me in a different way. And I feel like with Raoul, he really wants like ownership of Christine. Like when he gets so mad because another man put a ring on her finger, it's like, yes, he is upset that he thinks she's, you know, cheating on him or seeing someone else. But he's also kind of like someone else got there before me. Like some other dog peed on his grass, you know? Like it's not cute to me. And like when he says stuff like to think, when I think that I had only one object in life, to give my name to an opera wench. Like,
Yeah.
I understand that he's hurting, but he says stuff like that a lot, and also for no good reason. And like, I think it'd be easier for me to forgive him if like the situation did look really bad. But all that's really happening is that Christine is behaving inconsistently, and she's telling him, I can't explain why right now, but like, we're good, we're okay. And he believes her for like 2 seconds, and then all of a sudden he's like, actually, you're full of it and you're a slut, get away from me. Like, so.
Also, aren't they like not officially together at that point? He just,
the first time that he flips, yeah, it's not, they're not anything.
Okay.
Yeah, this does not negate it being a red flag to me, because I do think that obviously people who are in an abusive situation, like sometimes the abuser will like threaten, self-harm or something like that as a means of control. But I don't view Raoul as a selfish character in those moments because there's like at least 2 or 3 times when he's like, no, I would give my life to save Christine. And to me, I don't view it in that lens, because he's not saying it to Christine. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it would be one thing if he was like, Christine, I will end myself to free you from this monster. But it's like him like telling his brother or telling the Persian, whoever, he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I will give myself up. She just needs to be free. And to me, I view that in a more romantic lens versus if it was like a threat to Christine, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair. And, that does come near the end. So, it is sort of like character growth on Raul's end. The way he's so possessive of Christine before they even get together and like flies off the handle if she so much as like talks to another man who's in her dressing room, it just really rubs me the wrong way. And I'm not even a huge fan of like stage musical Raul, because I think, Cara's gone.
No.
It's like, I'm done with this Raul apology.
Just like leave him out of this. Okay, but stage version.
I do find him to be pretty dull. You took away the fun parts of his character, which is him being ridiculous, and replaced it with a competent man who's handsome and pretty and saves Christine.
I love my little pretty boy.
Oh,
so sweet.
Listen, if someone hot is playing Raul, I might consider straying from the Phantom. But I do love me a problematic man. And like I said, he's got his own place. He's got a horse. He's got a boat. Got an income.
Okay, Raul has some of those things.
But he doesn't work for it like the Phantom does.
Oh, is he really working for his money? Please.
The Phantom is a self-made man.
He's threatening. He's threatening for his money.
But he had to work hard to do the murders.
He is an architect.
Yeah, but he didn't get paid for that. Well, I guess he probably got paid something for that until he just went rogue and was like, and here's my secret dominion.
Yeah. Men don't have secret dominions like they used to.
Okay, do we want to talk about Eric? Don't. Let's talk about Eric. My only specific question about Eric is I want to know genuinely, like statistically, even if you want to give me on a scale of 1 to 10, like how much do you actually pity this man for real? Like I need to know on a serious level, like where you fall between he's a monster and I forgive him, and he's a monster and I don't forgive him, and 5 is like he's a monster and I understand. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. This is an impossible question, Julia.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to give me a number, but I feel like that helps me.
I'm stuck between my head and my heart here.
Yeah.
Cara, if you want to go, I'm going to contemplate.
We can also just start with general thoughts on Eric, too.
I think, like I was saying before, one of the reasons that I seem to take Raul's issues more personally is that he's portrayed as being a good guy and like the romantic happy ending, whereas Eric very much isn't. And also with Eric, he has circumstances that do help explain some of, again, not his choices, but like why he might do certain things. Whereas like Raoul's been spoiled his whole life. Like that might also help explain.
I was going to say that explains
not...
to me perfectly.
Yeah. In answer to your ranking question, I might give it like a 7 because I do feel really sad at the end. Like, and the fact too that like he immediately, like one of the last decisions we see him make is that all Christine has to do is like let him kiss her forehead, and he's like, you can all go free, I can die happy now. Which again does not erase the murders that he did before, but it's sort of like, if I think of like his last actions, his last few decisions, even though a lot of times it frustrates me when we have characters who do like one good thing at the end of their life and we're supposed to be like, oh, you're a good person now. I feel a lot of sympathy for Eric. Like, I hate him too. I hate a lot of the things he does, but it breaks my heart that like he is shown like a single piece of affection, and that's all it takes. Like, it's really sad. And like when he goes to the Persian and he's like telling him his story and what happens, and then how like he basically just goes down to the basement of the opera and like curls up and dies of a broken heart. Like, it's sad. He's awful, but it's sad. So I guess that's my thoughts on Eric. He's awful, but it's sad.
I feel the same way as you, Cara. He does a lot of terrible things, and like Raoul, he also believes that he has some sort of ownership over Christine. I think other than the murders, the most heinous thing he does is sort of use Christine's grief over her father's death against her, and sort of plays at first like he might be some sort of angel sent by her father or her father, and he uses that as a way to like manipulate her. I don't want to use the term groom because I don't think that necessarily is right, but he is very manipulative in a way that is, I think, kind of reprehensible. But like you also said, Cara, like the fact that his mother didn't want to touch him, that he has all of these things to share with the world. Like, he's a great architect, he's a great songwriter, he's a great singer, he's a ventriloquist.
He's a very talented ventriloquist.
He can do his voice. Like, he has so many things to share with the world, but he can't even do that because of the way he looks. And it sort of makes you think like all of that talent is basically wasted. Not wasted, but like, the world will never know that talent because of how they treated him and how, he has been isolated from society. So there is that sadness, and that sort of like, when he feels Christine kiss his forehead, that one bit of human touch that he's been craving that entire life, his entire life. There is something like sad about how a single forehead kiss means so much to him.
Yeah. Can we change the stage musical ASAP? No kiss on the lips for Eric. That's gross. Kiss on the forehead only. I don't like it.
Except I love Ramin Karimloo though, so I don't mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, he is amazing, but don't kiss Eric on the lips. Kiss Ramin.
I like, Taylor, that you said, like, you were talking about like what a waste it is, and I think that is exactly it, where like a big piece of my like grief and sympathy comes from. It's the same thing I feel about Wuthering Heights, where it's like that book is full of terrible people. Like, arguably there's like 2.5 characters who are not like the worst. But one of the things that makes me sad about it is like sort of like a waste of a human life, like the waste of like happiness, the waste of like these could have been good people, they could have made each other happy. And I think that's one of the things that I sort of mourn for Eric, is that like we hear from the Persian, is like if he had just been born with a normal face, like things could have been so different, or if people had treated him differently. Yeah, so I think that's part of it as well.
Nana, or just could do a lot.
Also, it's really interesting to me that when Raoul and the Persian are like doing their little climbing through all the cellars, and then the Persian's like, actually, it was 3 floors ago. We have to go back. And I'm like, why? But while they're doing all that like spelunking in the opera, it's really interesting to me. Yeah, it's interesting to me that Eric doesn't kill the like gaslight operators, because like they say they like find 3 bodies, and I'm like, ah, shit, here he goes again. But he didn't, which doesn't make up for the fact that he has killed a bunch of people.
Yeah, at least 3
I
others.
thought that was interesting. Yeah, I thought that was interesting that like that also happens like right at the end of the book, you know? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, also, one of the most absurdly funny parts to me, this has nothing to do with Eric really, I guess, other than the fact that he doesn't kill this person, is like, who's the rat catcher? He's like coming through and he's like, don't mind me, just guiding the rats. What?
He's like this flaming head, like a face made out of fire, and yeah, and like the footnotes that Gaston Leroux like puts in there, he's like, I can't tell you who that is, but just let me tell you, it's a rat catcher.
So funny.
And it's really it's interesting too, because my edition, it has like the footnotes that Gaston Leroux includes throughout, but it also has like notes from whoever put this edition together that some of the analytical questions they bring up are really interesting, because one of the things it talks about with that rat catcher scene is like in that scene and in a few others, it points out like how Gaston Leroux is like making the fantastical even more fantastical by kind of explaining some of it. Like the fact that we have this like really bizarre apparition, and then we're told like, oh, he's the rat catcher, like don't worry about him. That's so weird. And then even things like about how Eric like built his little lair in the opera, it's like technically possible, even though it's extremely unlikely, because there was in fact a massive lake under the Paris Opera House. Like, I don't know. I thought that was an interesting thing to like point out, because I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah. That is interesting, because I was even thinking that like in the fact that, you know, they try to describe like, here's how he brought Christine through the mirror. Here's how, you know, we get out of the torture chamber, is there's going to be a little switch somewhere. Like, I liked that, because I'm constantly a person being like, but he's human, so how did he do that? You know, like that drives me nuts. Yeah. So the fact that we got a little taste, but it was like almost so over explained that I had to kind of like, I was like, okay, enough of this description of like how this mechanism lifts this and then it turns. And I was like, okay, boring. Like I wanted answers, but that's not how I wanted them. So it kind of worked in their favor, honestly. Like it was like perfect.
Speaking of the Phantom's Lair, can we talk about this? The scene where he has kidnapped Christine and he's showing her around as she is like screaming and crying, and he's like, no, this will get her going. And he's like, here's the coffin where I sleep. And she's like screaming and crying. And he's like, no, you'll get one too, babe.
I mean, first of all, it's wild just to even give someone a tour and be like, this is my bedroom, and then to open it and it's a coffin. Like,
this is where the magic happens.
The magic and the tragic.
The magic and the tragic.
Oh man. Yeah. Like it really, there are so many moments where like Eric does or says something that I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny, but it's certainly silly. Like I don't understand.
I think it's almost an indication that it was meant to be more gruesome than funny. The fact that like those things aren't in the musical, right? Like if they were down in the under the opera house and he's like, and here's my coffin bed, we would have been like, wait, what?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like at the
Okay,
time
man.
they were
Yeah.
like, ooh, spooky.
But also like him reassuring
Yeah.
Christine, like, no, don't worry, you will have your own coffin bed and we'll lay side by side in our coffins.
You're gonna love it, babe.
Chrissy, why are you screaming?
Chrissy.
Yeah. And it's also I wonder too, like these things where he obviously does not understand how to interact with people in a normal way, because he had no practice.
Yep.
And that's also one of those things that sort of like plays up how in some ways he is also portrayed as being very childlike, and the Persian even says that too. Like there's that scene where he's like talking to the Persian about like, oh, we're gonna be so happy and we're in love, and he's like kicking his heels. It's like this very like little kid image, which on the one hand makes it even creepier that he's doing these horrible things, but also I think like in some ways he like literally doesn't understand the implications of some of what he's wanting or doing. Like we talked about all the parts where Raoul is very fixated on if Christine is a virgin or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that with Eric, the like ownership thing, it's never like sexual or romantic, which doesn't make it okay that he kidnaps her, obviously, but I do think it's interesting that there is almost that, I don't know what word to use. There's almost that like level of, I can't think of a word because I don't want to say purity because that's a weird one to use, but it's like, you know, he doesn't want the things that Raoul wants from Christine. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess also because, you know, he hasn't even been like forehead kissed by a woman. So he's like, after he gets his forehead kiss, he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I had sex.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't fully agree, honestly. I don't think there's like I don't think there's necessarily a lasciviousness to the way he wants Christine, but I also don't think it's entirely innocent either. Because, you know, to say like, you can never marry or I'll never talk to you again. And, you know, like that very first time that we hear his voice, or I guess read his voice in the book, he's saying to Christine through the mirror, he's like, you must love me. Like that to me doesn't necessarily only read as like, hey, come live with me so I'm not so lonely. Like it could be paternal, it could be familial, or it could be romantic, but there is still, I mean, not that you were negating the ownership, there is still that factor too, but it's not romantic inherently to me. Like it could be still.
I don't even know. Yeah. I don't even know like if necessarily, and maybe this contradicts something I said closer to the beginning of our discussion. I don't even remember what word I used. But it's not even that I don't think Eric is viewing it as a romantic relationship. I don't think he's viewing it as sexual or even necessarily intensely physical. Okay. And that I think is interesting. I do think that overall the relationship between him and Christine is less romanticized, which, as we discussed, is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's like a better way to put it. Is it's not that I don't think he has a romantic interest in her, but it seems like, at least from what we're given, that it's not a sexual interest or even like physical in the way that like, you know, Ralph, for example,
Sure.
thinks of Christine.
Yeah.
Which is a departure from. Oh, sorry, Julia.
No, I was just thinking of like the first time like Raoul and Christine kiss on the lips, and they were like, "Ha cha cha, kiss on the lips." I was like, "Yeah, you are engaged.
Yeah.
That's allowed."
Yeah.
I do feel like in the musical, and this also depends on the Phantom, but there is this sort of like sexuality about him, especially the Ramen Karimlu, who I think plays him to be like sexy and sexual, or at least that's how Christine sort of
I think
sees him.
he's just sexy and he can't help it.
It could just be me.
That's also.
Oh my god, how tall are you? But it does sort of make the sort of her also seeing him as like the ghost of her father or something sent by her father, this weird sort of, I guess, psychosexual thing. Freud would have been proud.
A little too Freudian. Yeah.
He's like, oh my god, what's happening?
When I was looking for Phantom memes to share, because I was like, I know exactly where to go on my own Tumblr page, because I've blogged about Phantom for that long that I know I'll be able to find them. There was like a comic that someone had drawn that was like Meg and Christine. And maybe I should just find it rather than trying to paraphrase. Hold that thought. It won't be too long. But yeah, it definitely. Wait, no, that's not what I'm looking for. It was that same kind of vibe of like, wait, the ghosts of her father potentially? That's weird. Like, talking about.
Is it from that series of comics like Hark a Vagrant or something?
Oh, this wasn't Kate Beaton, but I love her. Her comics are so funny. Sorry, this will take a minute.
Nana, some of our memes are on
Nana,
Instagram.
you have. Yeah, and we haven't been doing them as consistently, so I don't think you're missing a ton of meme content.
I've shared a couple memes on Instagram, and I did post Phantom of the Opera with no context on Twitter today, but I think you're not on Twitter anymore, Nana.
Oh,
so.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Go look and enjoy. You'll get it. You know the context for all of them. I've got it. Okay, so it's this comic, and it's Christine, and she's like, oops, wait, sorry. I scrolled too far. And she was like, well, I don't mean to brag or anything, but my voice coach is definitely the hot ghost of my dead dad. And then you just see Meg, who's like standing there, and she's like, WTF?
What? Yeah.
The whole comic.
Huh? I do like the idea, Cara, of the Phantom being a kid, and I do feel like it could have been followed up more in the book, just because there are only, I think, too few moments, and it could have been so interesting to see him, I guess, throw these tantrums and not sort of realize the consequences. I don't know how to put it, but you know how like kids have these big feelings and they don't know what to do with them, so they might scream or cry or hit or throw themselves on the ground. And Eric's doing that, but he has the capacity to murder. So like, you know, he murders Joseph Bouquet, and he knows it's not right, but maybe he's like doesn't see the full scope of the consequences of that. Or you know, he kidnaps Christine and he's like, well, I want her, like she's a toy, and he doesn't like understand that she is a person with agency and feeling and does not want to date a 50-year-old.
This story really does give two boys on the playground fighting over a toy.
Truly. Yeah.
Yeah, that
it's like
honestly,
they're practically.
Go ahead, Cara.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, and this even comes across in the staging of that scene in the musical, it's like they're almost literally playing tug of war with her. Like at the end, they're like, "No, mine." Like,
my girlfriend.
yeah.
Yeah, it would. And I think that is one thing that the musical has in its favor, is that like the book is so intent on being like, Raoul, this 21-year-old idiot baby boy, and Christine, this little ingenue, and then the Phantom, Eric, this middle-aged man, right? So it's like on stage, the actors are usually more close in age, usually, not always necessarily, or at least their ages aren't being talked about so explicitly within the story. And so I think that kind of serves both the emotional reactions and also like the love triangle in their favor on stage, versus in the book where it's like, why would I ever ship Christine with this grody old man?
It's the Pretty Little Liars effect.
I've mentioned what's that?
I was saying it's the Pretty Little Liars effect because I don't know if you've seen it, but there's like a relationship with Arya and her teacher that I think a lot of people sort of dismiss because the woman playing Arya and the man playing her teacher are so clearly the same age that you're not like, that's a 16-year-old girl. We should be calling the police.
Yeah. I have never watched it, and one of the big reasons is that viscerally disgusts me. Like, I can't.
Oh, it's foul.
And there's no escaping it in the show. It will always come back around. So,
right. That's what I heard. Is it's like a major plot point. Also with Phantom, it's funny because I think I've mentioned in these live shows before that for whatever reason, I am so bad at noticing what ages characters are. And so I remembered
Pretty Little Liars.
Sorry. I remembered that one line that he says at the end about like a man of my age, blah, blah, blah. And that was it. Like, I am just picturing him being like a young adult like Christine is. So this is a good reminder that is not true.
But he was like, thank you for sparing a man of my age from doing a physical task because you know I'm so feeble. Like, he basically called himself older than he probably even is. He was like, me, a senior citizen, don't make me walk up the stairs.
That's the line I'm talking about.
Me at 28.
That's the line I'm talking about, where I was like, oh yeah, he's, I guess, older.
No, earlier than that.
I don't know why. I am not good.
I put my bookmark in it because I was on the prowl, okay? I was purposefully going to be like, I will destroy this man. I will find all receipts I can against him. And actually, it started when he called Christine child, because anyone who ever calls another character child and then it feels romantically about her, the biggest ick in the world. Oh, I hate it so much. I hate it. But yeah, he said, then I saw the keyboard of the organ, which filled one whole side of the wall. On the desk, there was a music book covered with red notes. I asked leave to look at it and read Don Juan Triumphant. Yes, he said, I compose sometimes. I began that work 20 years ago. So, like, do the mental math. He started writing an opera 20 years ago. So he was probably an adult then, right? So
Julia,
we're talking.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I don't notice this and it's weird.
I'm saying it's the first thing I noticed.
Okay. Well, you also like Raoul, so yeah.
So, okay, can I just say,
sense, Nina?
It's so weird to me how he was like, oh, the chandelier wasn't really me. That was an old chandelier, like trying to be coy. And I'm like, that's low-key, like the most gruesome murder to me of the whole book is like, you dropped this chandelier on a woman because you thought, well, not you thought, you knew that these opera house managers were trying to replace your lackey with this woman. And so you dropped a whole chandelier on her. Like, that's gnarly.
Yeah.
Like, that's some Final Destination stuff right there.
It is. I'm pretty sure, like, something like that happened in real life, and that was the inspiration for this book.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a concierge. It was like an usher
Yeah.
on her first day.
An usher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so sad. Oh my god.
It was her
Wow,
first
you guys
day
should be
at work.
hosting this. You know more than me.
I think what I consider Eric's worst murder is like the very casual description we get from the Persian of like, yeah, we were all hanging out in Persia and he just like built this torture chamber because the Sultana wanted it. So that was fun. And also the fact too, it's like the psychological nature of it, where it's like, oh, you can get out of here if you hang yourself from the tree. Like, it's very, very
It's
creepy.
dark.
Yeah.
Because like there are parts of the torture chamber scenes that are like so over the top and ridiculous that it's like not as creepy. But every time they like bring up like, oh, the iron tree, and it's iron so that like it can hold people.
The branch won't break,
Wilde.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like very Hunger Games in that torture chamber.
Yeah.
It was like, here's a mirage. Psych, no water. Don't you want to kill yourself? Ooh, maybe we'll flood the place. Like, it was baffling, the things that were going on in there.
Yeah. How big is this torture chamber?
Because at one point they were like running from what they thought was a lion. And I was like, wouldn't you know if the lion was there?
Yeah.
Like,
I love that he also shows Christine and he's like, oh yeah, bitches love torture chambers.
Christine, check this out, babe. You're going to love it.
I also have to say, one of my favorite scenes when Christine removes the Phantom's mask and like he freaks out, understandable, but he's like, I need to make her understand. And he starts, what my audiobook said was like hissing at her and like going, ah! And Christine is screaming and crying. And he's like, why are you doing this? Why are you crying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Eric.
I love him. He's so terrible.
Also, he is. Also, to compare him to a character that we both have sympathy for, Julia, I remember when I was like reading about Great Comet, and they were talking about Anatole, and the like writers or the director or somebody, they were talking about how like to enjoy or to invest in the musical, you don't have to like Anatole, like you don't, but you do have to understand to an extent why Natasha does. And so that's one of the reasons why they have that scene where he starts playing the violin, and it is so good and so like romantic, and because like that's the moment where most of the audience will be like, okay, I see it now.
I get it.
And so for me, having like all of these descriptions of the like singing and the voice and like how it seems to have like this power over Christine because it's so beautiful, and even the way that Christine herself starts singing when she gets these like lessons from him, that to me goes a long way to explaining why it can happen, and I guess sort of by extension making me view him more sympathetically, if that makes sense. And like even like the choices of which pieces of music, like the resurrection of Lazarus, like that's very heavy with symbolism. Like I don't know, I think that's really
there was
interesting.
Romeo and one of the reasons at one point.
Yes, Desdemona. That's another thing that my footnotes pointed out to me, and I'm like, "You're right. That's a good point."
I lost my mind when they were doing Othello. I was like, ah!
Yeah, and like all of those moments, I think, sort of like contribute to me viewing Eric as like more like musical Eric in those moments, you know, because I'm like, I get it. This is, and it also is kind of interesting in the sense that like Julia, you were mentioning for Christine, it is sort of like a like the word ecstasy, you know, it's like it is sort of like a like an awakening of some sort for her, and that's also very interesting that is like one of the things that draws her to this music, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, I follow
just a
what you're
thought.
saying.
Yeah.
Because I have had, for sure, I've had like talent crushes where I like step away from that person. I like stop hearing them sing and I'm like, oh, he's not all that. But like in the moment when I was witnessing the talent, I was like, oh my God, wait a second. Am
Yeah.
I feeling something?
Yeah.
No, you just have a beautiful voice. Like, that's literally all
And
it
like
was.
specifically for me too, like there is something about a man playing the violin that just like I am half in love with you already. Like, so
Oh, you
it
had to.
totally made sense to me why Christine was like, I will walk through this sketchy ass mirror. Like,
Good reminder for me to continue with the infernal devices. Thank you. A man with a violin.
justice for Jem.
Gem. And I have the books because of you, so I can read them whenever I want. At what cost?
I am so curious to hear your thoughts, Julia, when you
I know
get onto it.
I'm not gonna be happy. I know. Actually, I can't even remember what I gave the first book, if it was like 3.5 or 4. Anyways, sorry. We've been speaking for like 2 hours. So if you have any other thoughts you want to share before we share quotes, we can do that. But we've been talking a long time.
And I
There's
know
so
I
much-
have a good stack of quotes here, so.
Ooh. Yeah, I gave Clockwork Angel 3.5 stars. So higher than Phantom of the Opera, funnily enough. Aw.
One like very brief thing is I also remembered from previous times I had read the book feeling really sad and like feeling really bad for Philippe, who basically gets all caught up in this through no fault of his own and accidentally drowns in the underground lake. And I do still feel that way, but it was kind of funny or interesting because like rereading it, I'm like, oh, you're kind of a dick. like I don't think you deserved to die for it, but like literally every time we're told something about Philippe, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
why did I like you more before?
Yeah, I have no feelings about Philippe. He just was there to me.
Oh, I just want to appreciate the drama of the Phantom showing up in his Mask of the Red Dress costume, both in the book and in the musical. It's so dramatic, so unnecessary. I love it.
So extra. Classic Phantom. I do love
that was one of the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that was one of the 2 quotes that I specifically was like, where is it? Because like it says, my edition says, don't touch me, I am Red Death stalking abroad, which again, so dramatic, like so good. And I think the one in the other translation I had was something like, I am Red Death, like walking here or like passing by or something. And I'm like, no, not the same energy.
Sorry, abroad is like study abroad?
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, oh, he's stalking abroad. Christine is at abroad.
Yeah, classic stalking abroad.
That's hilarious.
It would have made just as much sense.
I was like, you know what? That is so Eric. So I get it.
Yeah.
You would, yeah.
I don't know what I was going to say.
Nana said that she had the same confusion.
I have quotes if we want to start on those.
Let us talk quotes.
Sure. I'm cheating and using Goodreads because I listen to the audiobook.
Classic. We love to see it.
I thought this one was just really funny. And like there were actually a lot of these moments where just like Gaston Leroux's humor, it reminded me a little bit of Anthony Trollope, where it's like just the way he would introduce a character. I'm like, that's hilarious. Like that's really funny.
I see that. Yeah.
So it says, everybody remarked that the retiring managers looked cheerful, as is the Paris way. None will ever be true Parisian who has not learned to wear a mask of gaiety over his sorrows, and one of sadness, boredom, or indifference over his inward joy. You know that one of your friends is in trouble. Do not try to console him. He will tell you that he is already comforted. But, should he be met with good fortune, be careful how you congratulate him. He thinks it so natural that he is surprised that you should speak of it. In Paris, our lives are one masked ball. Like, I thought that was
really good.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have this melodramatic line from Eric that I was like, ooh, I don't like you, but it hits the spot right here. No, he shouted, like K-N-O-W. No, he shouted while his throat throbbed and panted like a furnace. Know that I am built up of death from head to foot, and that it is a corpse that loves you and adores you and will never, never leave you. Dun, dun, dun. So dramatic.
Yeah.
Looking on Goodreads quotes. I have Tonight I Gave You My Soul and I Am Dead, which I did like when listening to the audiobook. It was just, I was on 2.1 speed and I was like, I can't go back.
You know what? We're not going to unpack it right now because we have been talking for 2 hours, but belatedly, hindsight, Julia, wishes I had posed a question about the themes of like life and death and dead and alive, because I feel like as a motif that comes up all the time with Phantom, with him being like a living corpse, and you know, and then Raoul saying like, I would die for Christine, and it's just very very heavy-handed, but in a way that is delicious to me.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that the Phantom looks
at
like
one point
skeleton. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
He looks like a skeleton, but he also lives underground. I assume the sewers are much deeper than 6 feet under, but like he's not like part of the earth or heaven. He's dead, essentially.
I loved the drama too of I don't know if it was a translation thing or just maybe they didn't have like the anatomical language then to be like a skull, but they would always be like a death's mask, the red death, like very dramatic language instead of being like skeleton face. It was great.
Yeah. Okay, so this is playing out, by the way, exactly how you predicted, Julia, with you being like, okay, but Raoul, and I'm like, okay, but the Phantom, and Taylor's like, I love the mess. So,
I know.
Living up to my self-appointed role as like, Eric is trash, but I also feel bad for him. This is like right at the end, and this is what I'm talking about, where it's like, even, oh no.
You're going to freeze again? If you freeze, I'm going to say a Raoul quote instead of you sharing an Eric one. Haha, this is my chance.
I think she froze.
Take that! Okay, so how about this line when, who's talking? I don't know who Raoul's talking to. Wait. Who the heck is he talking to? Sorry. Whatever. Oh, maybe it's Christine. Wait. He said, I trust you, Christine. Monsieur de Charny is in love with you and is going abroad. Before he goes, I want him to be as happy as I am. Oh, okay, yes. I said ham instead of am. It's when Christine is like, I only was engaged to you because the Phantom gave me permission to be engaged with you, which is wild, by the way.
Yeah.
And so she says to Raoul, are people they love? And he says, yes, Christine, when they love and are not sure of being loved.
Mm-hmm. I really like that quote.
Yeah.
I have one that like I like overall, but there is like a weird implication to it. Okay. So it's when the Phantom is dying and he's retelling his tale to the Persian. And he's like, oh my God, I'm dying of a broken heart. And so he says, I loved her so, and I love her still, Daroga. And I am dying of love for her, I tell you. And if you knew how beautiful she was when she let me kiss her, it was the first time, Daroga, the first time I ever kissed a woman. Yes, alive. I kissed her alive, and she looked as beautiful as if she had been dead, which plays into your life and death sort of motif. But also, the person didn't stop and say, oh, kissed her alive. Have you been kissing dead women? What does this mean?
That
Right?
line to me was a big red flag. I'm like, what do you mean as beautiful as if she was dead, you freak?
Yeah. Yeah.
But a good
It was
line.
very weird.
Like, why do you have to specify that she was alive?
Yeah.
Please.
Kiss her alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one I was gonna share before the spirit of Raoul kicked me off.
I know. I don't know if you could hear anything, Cara, but the moment you went off, I was like, great, I'll share a Raoul quote while she's not here.
So the one I was going to talk about is I was like, this is what I mean, where it's like, yes, Eric is horrible, and also why is everyone acting like he's horrible already just because of how he looks? Like, even at the end, which I think is sad, when Eric is dying, it says, Eric's emotion was so great that he had to tell the Persian not to look at him, for he was choking and must take off his mask. The Daroga went to the window and opened it. His heart was full of pity, but he took care to keep his eyes fixed on the trees in the Tuileries garden, lest he should see the monster's face. I'm like, he's literally dying as we speak, and the Persian is like, I might vomit if I have to look at my friend's face, so I'm just gonna like
And like
walk away.
At first you think it's like out of respect, like Eric doesn't want me to see his face, that's fine, I'll go to the window.
Yeah.
But then he has to add, so I won't look and hurl at my bestie.
Monster.
Yeah.
It is, you know what
Yeah.
is so wild to me that we haven't even mentioned? It's crazy that almost everyone at the opera house who like works in the opera house is like, oh, there's for sure an opera ghost. Like, we are aware of this opera ghost. And once they start, all the things start happening, and Christine and Raoul are both like, it's the angel of music. No one ever even thinks like the angel of music is clearly the opera ghost. Like, no one, they refuse to conflate an angel with like this demonic presence who's haunting them and like killing them, which is like,
Yeah,
genius, but also like baffling at the same time. I'm like, wow.
That reminds me, I remember watching a like behind the scenes interview or something with Emmy Rossum, who plays Christine in the movie version, and she's talking about how they all went to like tour the Paris Opera, and she's talking about like how amazing it was, and they actually got to see some of like the lower levels and things, and she's talking about how like she was joking around with like one of the women who was showing them around, and she's like, oh, like, do you ever like see any ghosts here? Do you think there's ghosts here? And the woman goes like, oh no, souls. And she said like it was a real, like, it was just really interesting because like it was, for them, it was like a totally different experience than like how we would think of like, you know, some places being haunted. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's this is one of my favorite lines in the whole book, but I feel like I need to lead up to it with like the paragraph. So it says, poor unhappy Eric. Shall we pity him? Shall we curse him? He asked only to be someone like everybody else, but he was too ugly, and he had to hide his genius or use it to play tricks with, when, with an ordinary face, he would have been one of the most distinguished of mankind. He had a heart that could have held the empire of the world, and in the end he had to content himself with a cellar.
Dang. That's interesting. That's like slightly different from the version of my translation, but I do quite like it.
Yeah. It's also so sad.
I just think that's so sad. That's like what you and I were talking about, Taylor, where it's like the waste of potential is one of the things that is so heartbreaking. Like, not just his talent, but also just like being a person.
I take it back. I'm really mean, actually, because I did tab that quote and I wrote on the side, "Speak for yourself." I got beef with Eric. I'm so sorry. I don't like that man. We didn't really get into it, but like where you said you were like a 7 on like the sympathy scale, I think
Oh,
I'm
you're like a -4.
I'm like, no, I'm like a 3 or a 4. Like I'm a straight up, like I understand logically why you are the way that you are, but you make me so upset that like it's taking away the majority of my ability to empathize. Like it makes me mad.
Well, I mean, that's how I feel. That's how I feel about Raoul, though. And what I think is one of the things that's so upsetting about his character is like he gets the absolute perfect happy ending. He gets everything he wants. And he's a piece of shit for most of the book. Again, he's not doing the kinds of things that Eric is, but he is like he is so hateful towards Christine the second he thinks there's a possibility that she even like interacted with another man. Like this is before he knows that Eric is a horrible person. He's like
21. His brain is not fully formed. Straight up. Like
okay, but
I'm not saying the things that he does are good.
But
sorry,
I just like I cannot accept Raoul as a romantic lead. This is like my thing with like Jane Eyre versus Wuthering Heights, where it's like all of the horrible things people say about Wuthering Heights, I agree. Like I like that book, but you are right about everything. But the thing that pisses me off is people act like those things don't happen in Jane Eyre. And like that's how I feel like this is I'm like Eric and Raoul, both trash. Both should not be a boyfriend. Like
both are not ideal boyfriends, but one at least obeys the law.
But like I don't think Raoul treats Christine much better than Eric. Like if we just think of like how they interact with Christine, I don't think Raoul is any better or any more like he wants to own her in a very similar way.
But I think of the times when he is the worst, only like 2 of them are actively in front of and to Christine. I think a lot of it is like me being mad at him, but it's like what he's thinking to himself, which not to say that that's better, but at least it's not like kidnapping her.
Yeah.
In fact, she gives him permission to kidnap her. She says, "Raoul, if I say no, take me out of here."
We love a consensual kidnapping.
But at least at least with Eric, it's like he changes. He does better. I am not. It's like at least with Eric, he like becomes better by the end. Raoul is rewarded for being awful, and I don't like that. And I think it's also like partly this is like why I say that I am a much harder sell on like hate to love when it's in contemporaries, even though I know this is like not the same trope, but it's like I have such a hard time with it because there isn't that distance between the real world and the story that you get with like speculative fiction or even like historicals. That's to me like Eric's bad things that he does are way worse, but they are also more removed from reality. Whereas Raoul, he is like a classic fuckboy who it's like you'd be calling like about a domestic disturbance. Like I think he gives me strong like controlling boyfriend vibes. I really don't like
I think Raoul improves over the book as much as, if not more than Eric.
Really? I feel like Christine's the one who makes the better things happen. He's just sort of like forced to go along with. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
well, I stand by. I think he is an object in this story. I think that he's being utilized in a subversive way, and that I don't agree with everything he thinks.
Still terrible.
He's not a great boyfriend, but he's a better fiance than he is a boyfriend. And he's a better person than Eric.
He is. I'm not denying that. I'm saying, like, I don't know how you can hate Eric and not hate Raoul. I hate both of them, but at least with Eric, I feel sympathy for things that happened to him. Raoul has been, like, spoiled and rich and a snob his whole life, and he treats the woman he loves like crap, and then he gets rewarded with a happy ending at the end.
I can unpack it fully, actually, right now, because it has come to me in a wave of clarity. In real life, everyone would be like, oh, poor Raoul, blah, blah, blah. You're being too hard on him, and I would hate him. But in real world of, like, theater, everyone is like, poor Phantom, Raoul's so boring. And that makes me so mad and livid that I want to be like, no, this guy sucks, and you're being too hard on him, even though in real world logic, it is the opposite. That's it. It is only because of the Phantom of the Opera musical fandom that I'm this way.
Yeah. No, that I can understand that. Like, the fandom, absolutely. I honestly, I have been trying to make it so clear that I do not like Eric. I do not romanticize him. I'm just saying that in terms of, like, sympathy for what he's been through, or, like, for things that have happened, like, making me sad that he dies the way he did, I am sad about it. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that Eric is better or, like, a romantic character.
Yeah.
I will say I'm neutral on this because I love and hate them both in equal measure because they are two drama kings, and I love that.
So my friend Brittany has lent me a book that I've been putting off reading because I wanted to read Phantom first. And I'm trying to find it on Goodreads now so I can read you the synopsis. If only I knew who the author was. That would be very helpful. Ugh. But it is a Phantom of the Opera prequel.
Oh.
I think I've heard of that one.
And it's partially about the Phantom, but it's partially about his mom. So I'm going to lose my mind. And if she's the worst mom in the world, which canonically she probably should be, I'm going to be sad. But I hope that there's, like, an extra element that I'm not thinking of. Phantom of the Opera prequel book. Susan K. Is this the one?
Yes, I've heard about that one.
Oh, no. Sorry. I went on Wikipedia and it was like, much of the verbal and physical abuse Eric suffers from his mother is chronicled in the opening chapters. No. Oh, but you know what? This plot summary does use the word Romani. So there's a
hey, we're moving already ahead.
Yeah. The rest of the book follows the original novel through the relationship between Christine and Eric. Although the relationship is explored in greater detail and with greater compassion than the original novel. So will I love it or will I hate it? Who's to say?
I will say, if we take into account Love Never Dies.
We don't. That is not canon.
We do not.
It's not canon. Take it all away.
It does not exist.
I love
Julie and I will unite and fight you about it.
Finally, we stand together. She's just a girl.
Just a little girl.
She's just a mommy.
Yeah. I do have a few other quotes, but also... No, sorry. I just wanted to say, too, that we didn't specifically talk about this as part of the xenophobia and Orientalism, but, like, one of the things that made me most uncomfortable with the book is the way that the narrator is basically like, well, you know, those Arabic countries, they love to torture people. And I'm like,
Oh.
What was that
Like,
throwaway
honestly-
line where he was like, and then the Sultana learned how to use the Punjabi lasso, and she killed several of her friends. I was like, literally, what are you talking about right
A
now?
woman's not allowed to have
Yeah.
hobbies?
It was so out of the blue.
Yeah.
I was like, huh?
Yeah.
Also,
Also,
your
yeah.
like worst friend
Yep.
starts strangling your friend group, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe Sultana is going around strangling people.
This is so awkward, you guys. Like,
he's giving the Wrath and the Dawn, if I'm being honest.
Ooh, I loved that book a couple years ago. I haven't read it in a long time.
The side couple.
I did
I loved
Yes.
his friend Jalal. That was my
Mhm.
boy. That's the only thing I remember about my review is just me being like, Jalal, Jalal, Jalal. That's the only thing that matters here.
That was like my review for Crime and Punishment, where I was like, this book is goofy, but I really like the side couple.
that's fun.
Okay, so 25 minutes ago I said we should share quotes. So does anyone else have any other
I know.
quotes?
I do have a few more, but if you have more, we can still alternate. I thought this was hilarious. Armand Moncharmin wrote such voluminous memoirs during the fairly long period of his co-management that we may well ask if he ever found time to attend to the affairs of the opera, otherwise than by telling what went on there. I
Very
love
good.
it. This one I also marked as, like, I mentioned the really interesting, like, religious imagery and, like, the whole angel of music and all of that. And something that is, I think, very interesting about it is that the narration of the book, it talks about being visited by the angel of music. Like, this is a thing that happens to people. Eric is not that, but it does happen.
But it's for sure a real thing.
Yeah. No one ever sees the angel, but he is heard by those who are meant to hear him. He often comes when they least expect him, when they are sad and disheartened. Then their ears suddenly perceive celestial harmonies, a divine voice, which they remember all their lives. Persons who are visited by the angel quiver with a thrill unknown to the rest of mankind, and they cannot touch an instrument or open their mouths to sing without producing sounds that put all other human sounds to shame. Then, people who do not know that the angel has visited those persons say that they have genius.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Good quote. I have one to share that I'm struggling to find right now, but you'll appreciate it. It's not one of Raoul's finest moments, but it does make for a good scene. So I did tab it. Where the heck did it go? Oh, that one? Yeah. So this is what's going on. They're arguing just about Eric. It's Christine and Raoul arguing about Eric, as they are wont to do.
All their conversations are about Eric.
I mean, it is low-key, like, you and the guy she tells you not to worry about. It's like, you should be a little worried about it, honestly.
You should be worried for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Everyone in the story should be worried about various things.
But so her guardian, her adoptive mom, is like, and if she does love that man, Monsieur le Vicomte, then it is no business of yours. Alas, madame, Raoul humbly replied, unable to restrain his tears. My baby boy. Alas, I believe that Christine really does love him, but it is not only that which drives me to despair. For what I am not certain of, madame, is that the man whom Christine loves is worthy of her love. It is for me to be the judge of that, monsieur, says Christine, looking Raoul angrily in the face. When a man, continued Raoul, adopts such romantic methods to entice a young girl's affections, the man must either be a villain or the girl a fool. Is that it? I was like, oh, Christine, maybe both. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe a little bit of each.
She stands up for herself.
She
and
does.
I really like that. Yeah. Okay, here's another, like, music plus divine imagery, and this is like what I was talking about, where it's like, I think it's so cool and impressive to me that like there's obviously no auditory part of like reading the book physically, but the description is so good that I'm like, oh yeah, I can picture this. And this is when one of several times that Raoul is just like creeping around in Christine's dressing room, listening for other men. Which is really funny that he's like, there was a man in your dressing room. Yeah.
Also me, really but there was another
like, there was a man in your dressing room. Yeah, and Christine's like, yeah, it was you. And he's like, no, besides me.
I heard a different man in your dressing room.
Yeah. The voice without a body went on singing, and certainly Raoul had never in his life heard anything more absolutely and heroically sweet, more gloriously insidious, more delicate, more powerful, in short, more irresistibly triumphant. He listened to it in a fever, and he now began to understand how Christine Daae was able to appear one evening before the stupefied audience with accents of a beauty hitherto unknown, of a superhuman exaltation, while doubtless still under the influence of the mysterious and invisible master.
I literally had my thumb on that page ready to read that one next. So thank you for doing it, because it's a great line.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad, because I agree. It's a good quote.
Yeah. I feel like in exchange, I should let you, Julia, read one that is like a romantic part with Raoul and Christine that I also marked. The one you were talking about earlier. Do you have this one where it's like, it was the prettiest game in the world and they enjoyed it like the children that they were? And it's like, do you want to read that one? I feel like I owe it to you.
I do have. Well, you just read it.
No. Sorry. I mean,
I have the honor to ask you. I have the honor to ask you for your hand. Why, you have both of them already, my dear betrothed. Oh, Raoul, how happy we shall be. We must play at being engaged all day long. It was the prettiest game in the world, and they enjoyed it like the children they were. I mean, there's more, but that is like my favorite part of it.
I'm sorry.
It's so wild. Also,
I thought the part you were going to read.
Go ahead. Continue on.
What? Sorry.
The catching of the hearts.
I actually like the part. Yeah, they played at hearts as other children might play at ball, only as it was really their two hearts that they flung to and fro, they had to be very, very handy to catch them each time without hurting them.
But then Raoul's does get hurt. My poor boy. Also, why is he going to go to the North Pole? For real. What canonically, like, what is the reason? Do we know?
He's dramatic.
So my like bonus footnotes very helpfully told me that apparently there was this expedition to like try and rescue another expedition. But I'm like, this is the most random thing. Like, why?
Shackleton?
Why does this random Vicomte? They're like, let me look at what the details were. But like, I just think it's so bizarre. It's like, why does this 21-year-old like French nobleman? They're like, yes, you shall go and rescue someone from Antarctica.
Is it the Ernest Shackleton expedition?
I don't think so, because I would have recognized that name. Let me see. I know that one of the footnotes was about this.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, and that's not the North Pole anyways. That's Antarctica. Those are two different places.
Yeah.
I do love, while you're looking, I'm really laughing so hard at Nada being like, I know so many quotes. This is an audiobook. I can mark this book as read now.
Yes. You can. Yes.
You read it.
I still can't find it. Please share other quotes while I try to find this. D'Artois. That's what it is.
Who?
In search of the survivors of the D'Artois expedition for 3 years. Although the dates are not accurate, survivors of this real-life expedition could indeed be found. Leroux was the first European journalist to speak with the explorer and his crew after their rescue.
Whoa, that's cool. It's a fun little tidbit.
Who would have known? That's wild.
Yeah. Yep. I also the moment where like Christine vanishes on stage is so iconic. When she's singing "Holy Angel in Heaven Blessed," And Christine, her arms outstretched, her throat filled with music, the glory of her hair falling over her bare shoulders, uttered the divine cry, "My spirit longs with thee to rest." Very
I was feeling it.
also,
with
like,
my hair over
glory
my
of
bare
her
shoulder.
hair. I love that phrasing. Yeah, I love that phrasing. I think that was one of the other quotes that I specifically looked for because it just like stuck in my mind. But
Yeah. But also bare shoulders makes me think of, there's a great Comet meme that I saw where, you know how Natasha sings like, my neck, my bare arms. And then it was like a picture of like two furry bare
Yeah.
arms. That's what I think of every time. There's another, yeah.
that's hilarious. Yeah.
I love this quote about Christine. So this was really giving Marjorie Tyrell for my Game of Thrones girlies. This is when she's showing Raoul around the opera house. She moved among them like a popular queen, encouraging them in their labors, sitting down in the workshops, giving words of advice to the workmen whose hands hesitated to cut an inch into the rich stuffs that were to clothe heroes. There were inhabitants of that country who practiced every trade. There were cobblers, there were goldsmiths. All had learned to know her and to love her, for she always interested herself in all their troubles and all their little hobbies. Like, what a fun little niche thing about Christine to know that she's like socializing amidst every like costumer and goldsmith and everyone.
Yeah. Well, it gives like a deeper insight into her character, and it also lets you know like she likes everyone in this opera house. Of course, she's not going to sacrifice them, so she doesn't end up with the world's greatest freak.
Truly freak. Oh, good. Cara's gone again. I can share another Raoul quote now. I'm not purposefully saving these for when she's gone. It just happens to work out that way. This is before the rooftop scene. It's a little pre all I ask of you moment that I thought was sweet. Raoul says, I will remove you from this power, or I will remove you from his power, Christine, I swear it, and you shall not think of him any more. Is it possible? She allowed herself this doubt, which was an encouragement, for while dragging the young man up to the topmost floor of the theater, far, very far away from the trap doors. I shall hide you in some unknown corner of the world where he cannot come to look for you. You will be safe, and then I shall go away, as you have sworn never to marry. Christine seized Raoul's hands and squeezed them with incredible rapture. See, we're forgetting that in our condemnation of Raoul. He did at one point be like, well, you said you weren't going to marry anyone, so I'll just rescue you and then F off, I guess. He said that multiple times. He did. You can't say he didn't.
I'm loving these Phantom Wars. Is that a Star Wars movie?
The Phantom Menace.
Oh,
Cara is the Phantom Menace.
What would Raoul's be?
I don't know all the Star Wars movies.
I've only seen two, and apparently one of them is the worst one. I saw the first, like,
Attack of the Clones?
No. So the first one I saw was like the original first Star Wars movie, and then I saw Return of the Jedi, which I thought was fine, but then I watched or told people about it, and they're like, it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Jeez.
I was like, well, I know nothing about Star Wars, so I thought it was all right.
So if Cara as a Star Wars movie is the Phantom Menace, I think I'm either A New Hope or maybe Rogue One. She's gone rogue.
Oh no,
And
I think
Cara's
Cara's
frozen.
frozen.
Absolutely frozen again. She didn't even get to hear my jokes.
Maybe she can still hear them while she's getting things fixed.
Well, once she comes back, if we don't have any more quotes to share, I think we should wrap it up and share what we're reading next.
I'm excited for this one.
I have my copy next to me. To that, my edition is so beautiful that if I don't like this book, I will be livid.
I don't know if I bought my copy. I feel like I did, but I've been forgetting which books I've been buying, which I think is a bad thing.
She's with us in spirit. So true. No, I pre-ordered mine because I was like, these other editions offend me, and finally I found one that just strikes a chord with me. Really.
Oh, I'm excited to see your copy once we announce it.
Yeah, I know. The suspense that Nana only is going through right now. Cara, come back.
Oh, there she is.
Yay.
Sorry, this has been like the worst performance by my computer.
I'm surprised. I feel like usually it's me, so it's a relief to not be the problem child, especially while hosting.
Yeah.
But to wrap up that joke, I was gonna say, if you are the Phantom Menace as a Star Wars movie, I think I'm either A New Hope or Rogue One. Because she's gone rogue.
Not A New Hope. Raul does not deserve that.
I have so much hope for him that maybe he doesn't deserve. Nothing else makes sense. So, unless you think like Attack of the Clones, as in I like the same type of character and will forgive them sketchily every single time, maybe that's the vibe. But yes, if you don't have any more quotes to share, we were talking about sharing our next read and wrapping it up here. Bento, you want to show us next month's book?
Bento wants to join in. Cara, yeah, did you have any more quotes you wanted to share, or?
I think I'm good.
I'm not a Star Wars
girl, probably. So.
I Googled Star Wars movies. I've only seen 2 of them. I've seen 2.5 Star Wars movies. But because I work with children, I know every Star Wars character. I just don't know the movies.
I know the main ones in Jabba the Hutt because every once in a while my sisters will change my Disney Plus account profile to Jabba the Hutt to like make fun of me. They do it with all of our streaming platforms. On Hulu, I'm the Joker.
Twisted, demented, evil.
That's awful.
It's so bad.
A giant slug?
I usually have it as Belle, and I'm like, well, it's all settled because Belle's my favorite princess. And then I'll log in, like, I don't use it that often, but I'll log in like a couple months later, and I'm like, why am I Jabba the Hutt?
Stinkers.
But on that note, so our book for next month is going to be Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut.
Look at it.
Whoa.
Look at it.
So cool.
It's so pretty.
I love that. I have read one Kurt Vonnegut book before, so I'm excited to get to this one. And that'll be over on my channel probably around the end of this month. We'll nail it down, but you guys know how we operate.
Yeah. It should be at the end of June.
It's a pretty short book from what I understand, so.
Yeah. I mean, the typeface and all that seems pretty generous, and my edition is less than 200 pages. So,
well, we love that.
We love to see it. I mean, this wasn't laborious. Come on, guys.
No.
Phantom was not bad.
And I actually, like, in some ways, I feel like it might be a good kind of accessible classic for people who aren't as used to them. Because it's more plot focused than a lot of classics are. Yeah. And I think the kind of mystery gothic element makes it read a little quicker, especially in the first half.
I would agree.
And it's unintentionally and intentionally very funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, all that being said, whoever's going to read Slaughterhouse 5 with us, we look forward to having you join us next month. Also, I'm very intrigued by it also being called Or the Children's Crusade. What do you mean by that? What does that title mean? I guess what does Slaughterhouse 5 mean also? I don't know. But but the way those two go together, I could tell you even less. Thank you for those who popped in live with us and those who are watching back later. Much appreciated. As always, thank you, Taylor and Cara, for being hilarious and just very thoughtful and wonderful co-hosts. Always a pleasure to talk to you about books,
Thank you.
even when we're
Thank
arguing.
you for putting up with my computer.
Oh, of course.
Thank you for putting up with my computer today.
You know what? It was a conspiracy against us and we powered through, you know? And I maintain
That's right.
it did work well with the Phantom jokes. The Phantom alive.
It really did. It really did.
It wasn't on theme.
We are very dedicated.
Mhm.
Yes, we're so dedicated to the theme that even our tech problems. Yeah.
As one does. All right. Well, we will sign off, and I look forward to chatting with you all soon. Bye-bye.